Night. Storms raging. This girl's booking it through the woods, and huge, icy raindrops are just pouring off her cloak. Finally, she finds what she's been hunting for. This is it. The aqua essence. The only way she can pull this off and take that woman down. The man stands by a tall window, watching the storm rip through, and whispers the girl's name. Early morning. Ophelia bursts into her husband Sylvester's study. The guy's pissed she barged in without knocking and asks what she wants. Looking Sylvester dead in the eye, she tells him they need to talk. Ophelia wants a divorce. But the husband doesn't even let her finish. He just orders her to get out of his office. She demands he at least hear her out, saying it's not too much to ask. Sylvester's giving her such a death glare, it's crystal clear she needs to scram. She tries one last time to suggest a divorce, but his silence speaks volumes. Once she's out the door, she grabs her head, totally not expecting begging for a divorce to be this brutal. The Countess's Guide to Remarrying is your typical melodrama. The main character of the novel is a countess. One day, she found a young dude passed out on her property. The Countess took care of this young guy, even though he was kind of a jerk. Wouldn't you know it, the kid turns out to be a long-lost prince. Soon, he's back in power and proposes to the Countess. And this is happening even though the woman's already married. This romance novel was a real escape for the girl, stuck in the hospital, just trying to take her mind off things. The character who really gave her a rush was Ophelia MacGuffin, only daughter of a duke's family, renowned for her beauty even in faraway lands. But alongside her looks, rumors swirled that she was actually a total villain. At her debutante ball, Ophelia slapped a young noblewoman her own age, and that was just the warm-up. She kept causing trouble and getting physical with people day after day. The Duke, feeling cornered, decided to rush her into marriage. The villainess's fiancé was Grand Duke Regan, who Ophelia loathed with every fiber of her being. Because Sylvester Regan was half human, half demon, with demon blood running through his veins. But he was the only one who could accept Ophelia for the troublemaker she was. Because he was after the connections and power of the Duke's family. The wedding happened against Ophelia's will, a simple ceremony without any frills. Right after the wedding, the Duke's family's massive debt was exposed. Ophelia's father was to blame. He gambled everything away, but luckily she was freed from his debt because she got married. Duke MacGuffin, eventually tormented by his creditors, took his own life. And from that moment on, Ophelia began studying dark magic. Shutting everything else out, she spent years in a daze. But one day, something snapped her back to reality. Ophelia fell head over heels for the crown prince, who after 16 years was found and officially recognized. He was a gorgeous blonde-haired man, Callian von Regan. Ophelia's love turned into a full-blown obsession. She was attacking, kidnapping, and doing unspeakable things. The crown prince was furious but felt totally powerless. Whenever he tried to punish Ophelia for her behavior, her husband, the Duke, would immediately make all the problems disappear. Sylvester Regan was the most powerful guy in the Empire, able to manipulate everything in his fight against the prince. It was villain time, and eventually Callian decided to take some serious action. He forced Ophelia to prove her love for him by taking out the Duke. The girl didn't hesitate for a second, and using dark magic, she drained Sylvester of his magical power. The Duke died a horrible death, and his wife was sentenced to hang. A path of betrayal connected these four people, two of whom were blessed with the hero's journey, while the other two met their end as villains. The girl hated the ending of the novel so much, she threw the book across the room. That night, she fell asleep with a heavy heart. But when she woke up, she realized she'd been sucked into this novel, and it was totally insane. The girl was lying on the damp ground in the pouring rain, trapped in Ophelia Regan's body. Bright rays of sunlight streamed through the bedroom window, announcing the dawn of a new day. Ophelia stood in front of the mirror, staring at her reflection. Even amidst all this chaos, she was more beautiful than ever. That very day, after arriving here and barely making it back to the palace, she gathered her thoughts to figure out where she was in the story. Thank God it's before Sylvester gets, taken care of. But unfortunately, it's after Ophelia fell head over heels for the crown prince. In other words, it's happening right when she starts giving Fleur, the main character, a hard time. This chick doesn't just humiliate her at fancy parties, she's wrecking her husband's business too. Ophelia even tried to sell Fleur into a bad situation, but luckily the story hasn't gotten to that part yet. She's always been a nasty piece of work, but we need to figure out when she totally lost it and went as far as murder. Maybe it happened right after that thing went down. Ophelia had a falling out with her dad because he decided to marry her off to a demon. He just couldn't wrap his head around why she was so against it. Like a wicked woman and a demon wouldn't be a match made in hell. That was the last time Ophelia ever spoke to her father. After she found out he died, she vanished for a while, then suddenly showed up in the dungeons of Duke Regan's estate. Sylvester ran to the commotion to see what was up, and he was floored. Ophelia was standing there with crazy eyes, some weird stuff was dripping from her hands, and she announced that her father had returned. She tried to summon his spirit using forbidden, seriously messed up black magic. That's why Sylvester locked her in the dungeon and ordered the dark mass Ophelia summoned to be burned to a crisp. Even though the girl's mind's a little scrambled, she still has feelings for her parents. And now, our main character, stuck in Ophelia's body, is wondering if she can even mess with black magic. But she decides to deal with that later. Because right now, no matter what's going on, the most important thing is that she is Ophelia now. And she's completely healthy. Before, she was super miserable, living every day waiting to die from some nasty disease. Ending up in a healthy body like this is a total miracle. And since she got this shot, she needs to steer clear of the main dude, who hates Ophelia and her scumbag husband. Dead set on getting a divorce, she heads out to find the Duke, but the maid says he's not home. After saying that, the maid reflexively covers her face, like she's scared Ophelia's gonna take a swing at her. But to her surprise, the lady just turns away and gets on with her day. She's trying to figure out what the heck her husband's even thinking. He agreed to this marriage to form an alliance and keep the crown prince in check. And now that the MacGuffin dukedom has fallen, maybe he'll finally agree to a divorce. There's no way she can believe he actually has any feelings for her. Either way, if Sylvester doesn't agree, she'll just have to convince him. So, to drive her husband away, she decides to act like the real Ophelia, the most awful person ever. Having sorted out her thoughts, she heads to the guest room. She throws open the doors, ready to nail this first meeting of the day. The top designers from the capital are waiting for Ophelia in the room. Just getting Madame Yona, Madame Aunt, or Mademoiselle Shine to show up costs a fortune, and here they are, all three of them. The girl greets them, then notices something weird. All three ladies are already shaking for some reason, like Ophelia usually beats people instead of saying hello. Slouching in her chair, our girl asks the designers if they brought the catalog. Mademoiselle Shine hands her an album, and the Duchess's table is already stacked with all the catalogs for the season. Since all this is step one in Ophelia's plan to get divorced, she asks the designers to give her everything they've got. Each catalog has at least 10 dresses, and even Ophelia might be floored by this level of extravagance. The maid, totally caught off guard, asks her mistress if she's sure about this decision. Crossing her arms, the girl asks if there's a problem with that. The maid replies that it's not that, it just seems like her mistress is acting a little different. After all, Ophelia usually bought every single dress without even looking at the catalog, and if they didn't meet her standards, she'd order custom pieces and even outfits for next season. The maid tells her mistress to just let her know if she wants to wrap things up sooner. And in that moment, the heroine realizes that her imagination is nothing compared to the real Ophelia's. So her first step toward getting a divorce just spectacularly backfired. She really doesn't want to move on to plan B, but she doesn't have a choice now. They say Sylvester cares so much about his staff that he remembers the names of over 100 servants. So Ophelia decides to move on to the mistreating the servants part of her plan, and just happens to run into a maid in the hallway. This time the girl decides to go all out, to get it all over with in one shot. Running her hand along the shelves, Ophelia roughly beckons the maid over. The heroine starts chewing out the maid, who's shaking with fear for not dusting properly. Then, mentally apologizing to this innocent girl, Ophelia kicks over a bucket of dirty water. Crossing her arms, she coldly orders her to clean everything up again, under her watchful eye this time. With tears in her eyes, apologizing, the maid rushes to wipe up the spilled water. Watching her, Ophelia wonders if she should really be going this far for a divorce. Just then, Oliver the butler runs up to them, wanting to know what's going on. Ophelia decides to take advantage of his arrival, find something to pick on, and drive the old man to tears. Glaring at the butler, she claims she was just teaching this incompetent maid how to clean properly. The heroine stares daggers at Oliver, hoping he'll get mad at her. But for some reason, it doesn't happen. The old guy just throws his hands up, happy, praising the lady for her excellent work. He figures the maid got lazy and was mopping with dirty water, and that deserves a proper punishment. Suddenly, Oliver rushes over to the girl and starts examining her from head to toe. Then, with tears in his eyes, he suddenly concludes that despite such a blatant mistake, the lady didn't lay a finger on the maid. Because before, she might have poked her in the eye with the mop, or made her shower in dirty water. Once again, the heroine couldn't outdo the real Ophelia's ingenuity, and her plan failed again. It seems like all this is pointless because they're on completely different levels. The girl has one last way to make Sylvester file for divorce. That evening, she shadows him, waiting for the Duke to leave his study. She figures even if Ophelia's a legendary villainess, her pride wouldn't let her stoop this low. The girl's plotting to swipe some cash from Sylvester's desk. Originally, she wanted to blow it on some pretty boys, but Ophelia's reputation is so trashed, nobody wants to hang with her. Our girl's trying to find a promissory note or something that'll make Sylvester absolutely lose it if it goes missing. She just can't wrap her head around why this guy won't agree to a divorce. That's the 5th time he's kicked Ophelia out as soon as she walked in to talk. Suddenly, the girl finds some kind of envelope and the seal on it looks really familiar, and just then, Sylvester walks into the study. When he asks what she's doing there, Ophelia coolly replies she's rummaging through his desk, and even though she was looking for money, there wasn't any. Just as she's opening the envelope, she finally notices the rage on her husband's face. And even though she thinks she's finally achieved her goal and he'll agree to a divorce, Sylvester walks over and grabs her shoulders, all happy. The Duke's incredibly pleased that Ophelia's finally decided to step up and be the proper lady of the house. His sudden reaction completely threw her off guard. She stares intently at Sylvester and asks again, making sure he really understood what she was doing. With a totally calm and collected look on his face, he confirms it. Still not giving up hope, Ophelia repeats that she was just trying to relocate some funds. Sylvester smiles and agrees that it's definitely a proactive way to acquire assets. Then the Duke adds that something's been bugging him for a while now. Hearing this, Ophelia tries to pull herself together because this is all starting to sound totally bonkers. She never thought dealing with Sylvester would mean having to watch out for this. They say Duke Regan only got his title and fortune because of that freaky ability of his. And just now, he was trying to charm Ophelia into falling for him, all to twist her perception of things. Arms crossed, Sylvester asks his wife if she knows he's the head of the Intel Guild. As he says that, the guy's twirling a gold bracelet in his hand. And it's only now Ophelia realizes the bracelet's gone from her wrist. According to Sylvester, stealing info or riches is the same thing, and that's the golden rule in his guild. Then he smirks and offers to teach Ophelia the art of acquisition. The heroine stares at this lunatic and realizes another plan for divorce just bit the dust. Finally snapping, she screams, wondering what the heck she has to do to get him to agree to a divorce. Sylvester stared at his wife, surprised she suddenly realized she'd gone too far. He walks up to Ophelia, studying her face because her sudden urge for a divorce feels off. I mean, she used to say she wouldn't leave his mansion until they slammed the lid on his coffin. Ophelia begged him to just stand there like a statue, saying all she needed to see was his face. She's asking Sylvester to pretend all this never happened and just get a divorce. But he's standing his ground, refusing her again. Sylvester doesn't get why she wants this, seeing as he's so loaded he's got money for lifetimes. Plus, and he's not trying to brag, but he's ridiculously good-looking. So the Duke can't even begin to imagine why Ophelia's so desperate to divorce him. Being the Duchess of Regan is a sweet deal, especially since Sylvester, among other things, didn't even care about her thing for the prince. Yeah, I get that her request sounds nuts, so Ophelia decides to tell her husband she's just not feeling it. The Duke stares at her for a beat, then asks if she's got the hots for the crown prince. She's so shocked he realizes he probably shouldn't have gone there. Then Sylvester turns to Ophelia and lays a deal on the table. He promises to cut her loose if she can, persuade the crown prince to join their side. Later on, the Duke and Duchess hop in their carriage to head to some fancy shindig. Ophelia's just sitting there, clutching her head, sighing like crazy. Without even looking up from his paper, Sylvester asks her what's with all the heavy breathing. She thinks there's no way she can get the prince on their side, and wonders why he's so confident. Sylvester, for his part, is surprised Ophelia's even bothering to put on a show. So she's the one who's been sneaking into the crown prince's palace. She's the one intercepting Callion's invitations and, yanking the hair of all the ladies invited? Sylvester also mentioned how Ophelia was waving around a pocket knife, threatening to, well, let's just say she wasn't happy with the prince. And just like that, thanks to this little chat, our girl suddenly gets what Sylvester's really up to. The Duke's backing the other prince for the throne, and Callion, with the Emperor's support, is making things difficult for him. That's exactly why he and Sylvester are at each other's throats. And right in the middle of all this mess, there's Ophelia, completely obsessed with the crown prince. Because of her, the whole thing with the prince is getting way more attention, and the Emperor even had to publicly scold Callion. Sylvester's deal is about using the people to his advantage, because the more Ophelia acts out, the shakier the prince's position gets. The girl asks the Duke how he could possibly use his wife like that. Sylvester, though, figures chasing after other dudes while you're still married is way worse. And if she's gonna spend her whole life chasing the prince after a divorce, she's better off doing it with a duchess title, 'cause it'll be better for the Duke himself. So, he promises to divorce Ophelia if she pulls it off, and he'll be looking forward to it. And now, our heroine finally sees the real imperial palace, like something straight out of a romance novel. Since the prince himself will be at the reception, Sylvester asks Ophelia if she knows what she's supposed to do. Fixing his wife's hair, the Duke notices a change in her. Guess she doesn't even care if her hair's a mess now, but the crazy lady look ain't half bad either. Ophelia thinks it's more like wild charm, and the Duke just chuckles. The heroine enters the grand hall of the imperial palace. It's the first time she's been in such a crowded place, 'cause before she came here, she couldn't even dream of something like this because of her health. As Ophelia moved through the crowd, she overheard people whispering about her husband. Some were shocked the Duke even showed up, while others warned each other to keep it down or they'd be cursed. Ophelia hated hearing them talk about Sylvester like he was some kind of plague. Suddenly, she heard a man's voice behind her, clearly annoyed by all the commotion. Turning around, she saw Prince Callion, a broad-shouldered blonde with gray eyes and a regal presence. According to the laws of this world, a woman living alone without a valid reason gets thrown in jail. But Ophelia was trying to stay positive, imagining all the perks of living the single life. So, the heroine's primary goal was to make the crown prince hate her just a little bit less than he already did. But Callion suddenly raised his hand, pointing at Ophelia, and ordered the guards to kick her out. The girl begged them to stop, insisting she hadn't done anything wrong. Even though nothing actually happened today, the prince is bringing up that incident from last week. And even though she's been acting normal since she got here, Callion tells her to drop the act like she doesn't know anything. He's accusing her of breaking into the palace, swiping invitations, waving a sword around, causing a scene, and generally being a pain in the neck. And just recently, the Countess got an anonymous package. Inside was a box full of, well, let's just say it was bad news, and if a priest hadn't been there, things would have gotten really ugly. The box had Foxwoman written inside, and Callion thinks only one person could have sent something like that. The prince is glaring at her with so much hate, it's actually terrifying. He's forbidding Ophelia from going anywhere near the Countess, and promises next time he won't let her get away with this. She calmly agrees, but that just pisses Callion off even more, and he starts yelling, telling her she can't even say hello to the Countess. Even though Ophelia tries to smooth things over, the prince cuts her off and tells her to get out of here. He's calling the guards again to throw out, as he calls her, that pathetic villainess. But then Sylvester walks up, puts his arm around Ophelia's waist, and remarks that the prince is being pretty rude to his wife. Smiling at his opponent, the Duke also doubts there's any real proof linking Ophelia to that package. Then suddenly, Sylvester's smile vanishes, and he says sternly that he wouldn't advise anyone to talk to his wife that way. However, rumors have reached the prince that this honorable lady asked the Duke for a divorce. Ophelia can't figure out how Callion knows about that. Pointing to himself, the prince smugly declares that the Duchess has someone else, someone she truly loves. Ophelia is shaking with anger at how childish the main character is acting. Realizing things are getting out of hand, she takes Sylvester's arm and suggests they go back to their seats. And the Duke suddenly answers the prince's question about why they haven't divorced yet, and declares that he loves his wife very much. Silence drops in the room, everyone staring at Sylvester in shock. The crowd's whispering about how smitten the Duke is with his wicked wife, while he's secretly winking at Ophelia. Once the commotion dies down, everyone gets back to the party, and the Duke's schmoozing with the nobles. The heroine walks up to her husband and asks if he has a minute. She's pissed that everyone treats them like they're still on some never-ending honeymoon. After stepping out onto the balcony with Sylvester, Ophelia asks why he acted that way with the prince. She's talking about when the Duke told Callion he was head over heels for her. Sylvester's convinced that's exactly how to get the prince even more interested in her. Finding out it was all just part of his scheme, Ophelia tells him to give her a heads up next time he pulls something like that. I mean, everyone was so floored by the Duke's declaration, they were still buzzing about it even when she was standing right there. Sylvester's shocked Ophelia just stood there listening instead of kicking their asses like she usually does. She's positive her husband's plan is a pipe dream, 'cause there's no way the prince will ever fall for her. In response, the Duke reaches out and gently strokes her face. He insists Ophelia will totally nail it because she's the most gorgeous woman on this entire continent. She freezes, captivated by his mesmerizing gaze. Bathed in moonlight, the Duke is radiant, like he's covered in stardust. Back to reality, Ophelia says it doesn't matter how pretty she is. If she's got a rotten personality, it's all for nothing. Still, she took the deal, since she knows the original story inside and out. She'll find a way to make that crown prince develop feelings for her. But Ophelia's adding a condition. Every time the prince shows her affection, Sylvester's gotta pay up. I mean, she's gonna need cash to live the high life after the divorce. That's why she wants 10 gold coins for a letter from the prince, 20 for a bouquet, and she's happy to haggle on the rest. Sylvester smirks and tosses Ophelia a coin as an initial deposit. This is a gold coin with the royal seal, worth 50 regular gold pieces. Our girl bows and happily takes the money. The Duke calls her a truly remarkable individual. Stepping closer to her, he informs her that in his castle, the rule is you gotta give as much as you get. With a nasty glint in his eye, Sylvester adds that otherwise you might find yourself missing a hand. Later, lying in her bed, our girl thinks about the mess she's gotten herself into. Considering how much the prince hates her now, it wouldn't be shocking if she lost her head instead of just a hand. Maybe the only way this works is if I start acting like the main character. In the novel, Fleur saved Callion's life, and that's how their love story began. That bond got even stronger after she helped him, both physically and emotionally. And even if all this messes with the original storyline, the main goal here is survival. In the morning, Ophelia asks her maid, Irene, if an invitation arrived from Countess Cardell. The Cardells are one of the most prominent noble families in the empire, with backing from the former empress, the crown prince's mother. Before she died, the empress hid her final letter to her son in the earldom, but the earl's people don't know it's there. Ophelia plans to find that letter, get it to the prince, and then maybe he'll see her in a new light. Irene reminds her mistress that she and the countess are not on good terms. To be more precise, the duchess really doesn't care for Lady Cardell. Ophelia used to burn invitations from the countess, thinking her power just came from money. Ever since the duchess dumped that drink on Cardell at the last ball, the invites stopped coming. So, even though Ophelia can't visit the county without an invite, Irene's suggesting a casual visit to the Cardells. The Countess is chilling in the garden with her friends, soaking up the awesome weather. The ladies are all drooling over this gorgeous ruby necklace the Count got her. They're showering the Countess with compliments, gushing about her beauty and her baller lifestyle. Cardell knows they're jealous, but it boosts her ego, so she throws these tea parties all the time. Except there's this one lady here today who's just sitting there, quiet as a mouse for some reason. The Countess heard her family's about to go under, and doesn't get why she's not speaking up if she's gonna ask for help. But Cardell brushes it off, deciding to teach the girl a lesson later, and gets back to talking about the necklace. Suddenly, one of the ladies notices an uninvited guest heading their way. Everyone turns and is shocked to see Ophelia, who greets the group with a smile. The Countess jumps up to find out what brings the Duchess Regan here. Our girl's freaking out, 'cause she's gotta keep it together in front of a whole gaggle of nobles, but she's not letting it show. Ophelia says with a smile that it wouldn't be impolite to offer her a cup of tea, would it? The girl's behavior throws the Countess for a loop, but she tries to pull herself together, reminding herself that they're in her house. She announces that, even though the Duchess came all this way, there's no more room at the table, and they can't accommodate her. So, with the greatest regret, Cardell has to ask Ophelia to leave. Out of nowhere, a girl who'd been sitting quietly jumps up and offers the Duchess her seat. Turns out, Sylvester was watching the whole scene unfold from a window of the Count's mansion. He came to discuss business with the Earl and was pretty shocked to see the wife here, especially since she's always hated this family. Just then, the Earl walks up to Sylvester and, noticing the surprise on his face, asks what's wrong. When the Duke tells him about his wife's visit, he practically shouts in disbelief because the Countess didn't send Ophelia an invitation. Giving Cardell a hard look, Sylvester declares that his wife doesn't need an invitation to go anywhere. The Earl apologizes and asks to be excused for a moment to check on his wife. Sylvester lets him go, because the Countess might be in a tough spot. Last time, Ophelia soaked her and excused herself by saying the woman's hair caught fire. Sylvester's worried today isn't going to go smoothly either. The Duke's assistant walks into the study to find out what's up with the Earl, who ran out of here white as a sheet. Hearing it's about Ophelia, the guy makes such a face that Sylvester demands an explanation. According to his assistant, when it comes to the Duchess, he just expects the worst. The Duke tells him to watch his mouth unless he wants to lose it, and the guy nods, handing him the documents. The guy heard the madam asked for a divorce again yesterday, and he doesn't get why they don't countersue and bleed her dry. Sylvester gives him a cold look and replies that he loves his wife. When they first met, the Duke was floored. Ophelia was the first woman who wasn't charmed by him. According to the Duke, his wife is useful to him because her bad reputation draws attention to her and distracts from him. For example, the recent news about the tax hike was quickly forgotten because of the news about Ophelia's sword-swinging incident. And although the girl used to try to get the prince's attention, now she's acting differently and isn't charging headfirst like a bull, but acting like a fox. When the silent girl gave up her seat to the Duchess, Ophelia sat down at the table. The air was thick enough to cut with a knife, and she could feel everyone was on edge. Suddenly, she spots the dragon necklace that was talked about in the novel. The Countess starts gloating about how her husband gifted it to her. Ophelia smiles and gushes about how beautiful the piece is. The look on her face makes everyone think she's about to snatch the necklace for herself. One of the ladies shouts that Duchess Regan has no right, since it's a symbol of the Earl's love for his wife. Another girl backs her up, demanding that Madame Cardell tell Ophelia, "No way!" The Countess is totally lost, not getting what these women are on about. She stares at the Duchess, terrified that she might unleash some serious unpleasantness if she gets upset. Ophelia's clueless about what she did wrong. She just wanted to compliment the hostess's jewelry. This girl's trying to pull herself together, about to explain that the compliment was just to lighten the mood. She stands up, plastering on a smile, and tells the Countess there's been a misunderstanding. But when Ophelia raises her hand, Madame Cardell totally misreads it and freaks out. Clutching her head, she screams and tries to hide her face. A vase of flowers on the table goes flying and smashes on the floor. The guests are watching this whole thing unfold, jaws dropped, so surprised that the garden goes dead silent. Realizing she wasn't hit and it's way too quiet, the Countess figures out she overreacted big time. She looks up and sees Ophelia standing there, her dress stained with tea that spilled because of the Countess's spaz out. A million thoughts are racing through the woman's head. She can't figure out why the Duchess isn't pissed at her. The Countess's paranoia kicks into overdrive, and she's convinced Ophelia knows about the necklace and came here to set her up and take it. Cardell's practically choking at the thought of what the Duchess will do if she doesn't hand over the jewelry. She's not afraid of any curses herself, but she's worried it might affect her husband. So, without a second thought, the Countess holds out the jewelry box to Ophelia. Tears welling up, she begs the girl to take the necklace. Our girl's stunned, doesn't get why Cardell's giving her this. She says she appreciates it, but that's not what she came for. That line makes the Countess think Ophelia's after something else, and she yells that she doesn't have anything more valuable. The quiet girl, the one who gave up her spot to the Duchess, offers her a handkerchief. Taking the handkerchief, our girl kneels down next to the Countess and, smiling, tells her not to cry. But Cardell looks at her with such terror that she understands just how much the real Ophelia tormented her. Finally getting back on her feet, the Countess apologizes and suggests calling the tea party quits for today. Even though they try to stop her, the woman bolts towards the mansion. Ophelia grabs the jewelry box and yells for the Countess to stop. Then it hits her. She realizes she's just gotten her hands on something that doesn't belong to her. A jeweled trinket made from a dragon's shed skin, set with a gleaming ruby. This priceless thing could easily be traded for an entire mine. Then she wouldn't have to grovel like a beggar for handouts from her husband in exchange for seducing the prince. But the main character knows there's another way to get what she wants. She orders the maid to tell Count Cardell that Duchess Regan requests a meeting. And after a little while, the girl is sitting across from the Count, who apologizes for the modest reception, with the jewelry box and necklace sitting on the table between them. Ophelia's saying there's no need for apologies. The Earl already heard from his wife that she gave the Duchess a dragon necklace, but Ophelia's saying she's returning the gift because it's just a little too much for her. Our girl knows it's time to play her hand, return the necklace, and snag the Empress's letter. That way, she's gonna knock out two birds with one stone. Since returning the gift could bruise the Earl's ego and make him look bad, Ophelia suggests they make a trade instead. And a little while later, she's already sitting in the carriage, clutching that precious letter. She knew the letter was hidden behind a painting, but she didn't expect it to be such a cheap piece of junk. In the original story, she barely even found it. And even though Ophelia's a little bummed about giving back the necklace, the feeling of relief gives her hope, 'cause with this letter, she's definitely gonna get the prince's attention. Besides, the second everyone finds out the Duchess traded a priceless necklace for a crummy portrait, they're gonna say she's gone off the deep end. This whole thing's definitely gonna work out in her favor, so you could say this trip was a total win. But her joy didn't last long, because the very next day, all the papers were calling the Duchess a thief. Turns out the painting was a self-portrait by some genius artist, which Ophelia had absolutely no clue about. Since our girl got the letter she wanted, she decides to give the portrait back to Count Cardell to quiet the rumors. But judging by the Duke's face, he ain't given back squat. He's blown away by his wife's insane talent for bringing such a valuable painting into the house. Sylvester's already daydreaming about how, as soon as the old artist kicks the bucket, that portrait's gonna skyrocket in value and be worth millions. But Ophelia's not backing down and demands he hand over the painting so she can return it to the Count. Sylvester figures that since his wife stepped foot inside his place with that thing, it's his now, end of story. Right then, he looks like a little kid whose toy they're trying to take away. She reminds the Duke that this portrait is putting her reputation on the line again. Sylvester's genuinely confused. Since when does Ophelia even care about her reputation? Seems a little late for that. He tells his wife to think about all the stuff she's done that landed her in the gutter, where reputation shouldn't even be a concern anymore. As far as everyone in the Empire is concerned, Ophelia is a straight-up demon, pure evil incarnate. No matter how hard she tries to live her own life or help someone out, everyone's gonna see her through the lens of that villainous character. Looking at her husband, she tells him, her voice full of bitterness, that she doesn't have any allies. Her words and downcast gaze really hit the Duke hard. He walks up to her and asks if she seriously thinks he's not on her side. For a split second she freezes like she's totally mesmerized by Sylvester's charm. But then, snapping back to reality, she shoves her husband away, blaming him for everything she's going through. The Duke just watches his wife, a smug look on his face. It's only been a day, and this woman's already got the whole country stirred up again. Everywhere he goes, people are talking about her, and nobody even cares about the tax hike anymore. People are only interested in gossip, not boring politics. As far as Sylvester's concerned, Ophelia's free to do whatever she wants. But one thing he knows for sure, she can't leave him, because he's the darkness that finds freedom in her light, and so Ophelia has to be free by his side, until he says otherwise. Among all the letters on his desk, the Duke finds one addressed to his wife. The envelope's signed Jasmine Smith, and she's trying to remember who that is. In her letter, the girl hopes she's not imposing. She explains that she found herself in a pretty awkward spot yesterday. Because she's so shy and doesn't really socialize, Jasmine couldn't bring herself to join the conversation with the other ladies. Reading these lines, Ophelia realizes this is the girl who handed her the handkerchief during her visit to the Countess. Next, Jasmine thanks the Duchess for helping her get out of the tea party, otherwise Lady Cardell would have made her pay. The letter and the amazing weather have boosted the heroine's mood so much that she's decided it's a perfect day to meet the prince. Right now, she needs to move fast and follow the main character's path. After that, she'll have to get involved with the orphanage. Nobody cared about the city slums, but Fleur built that orphanage with her own cash. The royal family really appreciated her efforts and gave her the recognition she deserved. That's when the main character's position in the Empire really solidified, but Ophelia's planning to snatch that privilege right out from under her, because she needs to earn the Crown Prince's approval, no matter what it takes. And there she is, standing in front of the imperial palace, which looks even more majestic in the daylight. Even though she wasn't invited, she gave them a heads up she was coming, making sure to emphasize it was super important. But as Ophelia approaches the gates, the guard tells her the prince's orders. She's not allowed inside. She hands the knights a letter and asks them to give it to His Highness, hoping that seeing it will change his mind. The guard takes the envelope without a care and tells her to wait by the gate. An hour goes by, the sun's starting to set, and still no one's come out for Ophelia. Just when she thinks they've forgotten all about her, the knight finally returns and apologizes for the delay. She's furious about being treated so disrespectfully, but she doesn't show it and just asks to be escorted to the drawing room. The knight just coldly tells her she's not allowed inside the palace yet. Ophelia's shocked that even after the prince got and read the letter she sent, he still doesn't want to see her. The knight offers to read His Highness's exact words to her. The note just says one thing: get lost. Ophelia's heard that plenty of times from both her husband and the prince. She thinks this treatment is way out of line. I mean, she gave the prince his dead mother's letter and he not only kicked her out, but he had a guard deliver the message? All of Ophelia's efforts were a waste, and tears of frustration start running down her face. She thought her plan to get on Callion's good side was so perfect, she didn't even have a backup. She's thinking maybe she really should just focus on building that orphanage and get some attention that way. And just then, a girl walks up to Ophelia, and she recognizes her right away. This is Fleur William, the story's main character, the one who saves the crown prince, basically a goddess in the novel. She's worried that she might have been rude greeting Madame Reagan first. Ophelia covers up her weird reaction by saying the sun was in her eyes and she couldn't respond right away. Fleur seems super nervous about suddenly meeting the Duchess. But honestly, she's way more stressed than she lets on. See, the real Ophelia put Fleur through so much hell, and her schemes just kept getting worse as the story went on. Eventually, Ophelia got what was coming to her because she pushed the Crown Prince too far with her constant attacks on Fleur. That's why this time, unlike in the original story, she's gotta become friends with the novel's main character. The girls exchange the usual pleasantries, just going through the motions of high society etiquette. It's also sweet that Ophelia starts to think Fleur doesn't hold any grudges against her at all. When the girl asks the Duchess where she's headed, she explains she wanted to meet the prince but got the boot. Fleur says she's on her way to see the prince herself and promises to let him know she saw Ophelia. Just then, the Duchess notices a weird smirk on Fleur's face. Fleur wishes Ophelia a good day, and she leaves, totally confused. She wonders if maybe she just imagined that smirk. But even sitting in the carriage, something's still bugging the Duchess. After all, she definitely said she got turned away trying to meet the Crown Prince. There's no way Fleur doesn't know Ophelia's got a thing for Callian. The girl just can't figure out what all that acting was for then. She can't shake the feeling that Fleur's messing with her on purpose. But Ophelia pushes those thoughts away because there's just no way. The main character's supposed to be the nicest, sweetest person in the whole story. Honestly, when she was reading the book, Fleur's over-the-top naivete really got on her nerves. Maybe the real Ophelia's personality is still kicking around in this body, and that's why she's thinking about the main character in such a negative way. So, she decides not to jump to conclusions and just let things play out for a while. Who knows, maybe the original story's bad vibes can turn into something way better. Suddenly, Ophelia spots Sylvester through the carriage window, waiting for her right at the doorstep for some reason. Before she left, she'd left him a note saying she was off to snag the prince and he should get the cash ready. Now, looking at the Duke's stern face, she's already regretting drawing that little heart at the end of her letter. As she steps out of the carriage, Sylvester, looking like a thundercloud, asks her what she's been up to. Ophelia's clueless. She doesn't get what's going on. She hasn't done a thing, and they didn't even let her into the palace. His cold eyes flashing with rage, the Duke orders his wife to cut the crap. He shoves a letter from the prince at her, asking why Callian would send this, if that's the case. Snatching the note from his hand, Ophelia reads that the prince urgently summons the Duke and his wife. He's gonna make them pay for messing with his girl. The heroine is totally lost. What the heck is going on? And even though the Duke demands she explain what his wife's done to make the prince send a letter like that, she swears she's innocent. Sylvester sighs and suggests they head to the palace. At the entrance, the Duke and his wife are met by that same knight who kicked Ophelia out. The guy announces they've been expecting their excellencies and tells them to follow him. On the way, she whispers to her husband that this guy insulted her on the prince's orders. Sylvester's clueless about what she wants, so Ophelia asks if he's not pissed about the way she's being treated. The Duke reminds her that she's an expert at dishing out insults herself, like when she told Duchess Panin she looked like a grain of rice. Hearing that she called someone a grain of rice, Ophelia figures she probably owes them an apology, and when she says she needs to dial down the rumors about her, the Duke shoots her a hard look. That look throws her off, and she's not even sure if an apology would make a difference anyway. Either way, she needs to get her act together if she wants a peaceful life after the divorce. Maybe she should just lay low somewhere for a couple of years, chill in a quiet spot, like a little house with a garden. Just picturing it makes her heart sore. The Duke stares at his wife, wondering what's got her so happy. After watching her for a bit, he asks if she really needs those rumors to disappear. She can't believe her ears when Sylvester says her bad reputation actually works in his favor. She asks if it's because the more messed up stuff she does, the easier it is for him to do his thing. The guy admits he's impressed by Ophelia and smiles. Just then, they're told that His Highness the Prince is ready to see them. The Duke heads towards the door and, passing the knight, puts his hand on his shoulder. The next thing you know, Sylvester shoves the guard, and he's so caught off guard he falls flat on his face. The Duke says he heard about the knight disrespecting his wife and warns him there won't be a second chance. Hugging the guy's head, he whispers to him about his hobby of collecting round things. Then Sylvester lets go of the knight and, like nothing happened, with a smile on his face, suggests Ophelia head on in to see the prince. This girl gets it. The Duke's got a rep to uphold, family honor and all that jazz, even if he couldn't care less about her personally. No doubt about it, in moments like these, he totally comes off as the bad guy. Nobody's gonna dare trash talk Sylvester, the most powerful dude in the whole empire, head honcho of the noble faction. Only one person in the entire empire could even think about pulling that off, Prince Callian. Stepping out into the garden, Ophelia's trying to figure out why Fleur's bawling her eyes out in the prince's arms. Turning to the girl, he reminds her that he warned her to stay away from the Countess. Our girl can't believe Fleur's crying just because she said hi earlier today. Ophelia, totally ticked off, reminds her that she was the one who came up to her first, and they ended things on a good note. She asks what she did to offend Fleur, if this is how she's gonna act now. Bursting into tears, the girl begs for forgiveness and claims the Duchess is just too intimidating. The heroine's mind is reeling. She can't even process what's happening, let alone figure out how to react to this whole spectacle. But then, out of nowhere, the prince lunges at her, yelling at her to cut the fake act. He's demanding an apology, saying he's not letting her get away with anything this time. The prince seems completely unhinged, screaming that her family won't be able to wiggle out of this one. This whole thing feels totally unfair to her. She wants to argue that she and Fleur just had a normal conversation and parted ways peacefully. But if she repeats that now, Callian's just gonna get even angrier. And since the letter was a bust, Ophelia has to tough it out if she wants to improve her relationship with the prince. If she forces herself to apologize for something she didn't do, maybe she can avoid the ultimate penalty. So the girl bows to Fleur and admits that she was rude. But just as Ophelia is about to choke out the words of apology, someone clamps a hand over her mouth, and a familiar voice orders her to shut up. Shielding the girl, the Duke says this is all pretty messed up. He demands to know what his wife did wrong if all she did was greet the Countess. But the prince insists the situation is so serious, even Ophelia's apologies wouldn't cut it. He asks the Duke if he really thinks his wife did nothing wrong, and Sylvester confirms it. The heroine's freaked out that he's taking her side, and she tries to steer her husband away from this conversation. But then Sylvester adds that if his wife did anything wrong, it's just that she's visually striking. But no matter how visually striking she is, the Duke can't understand why the prince is acting like this over a simple greeting. Callian impatiently cuts Sylvester off and asks if he's done. The Duke gives him a cold, ironic look and says that's not all. Even if his wife did do something to the Countess, he thinks it's a bad call to summon them both like this. At least he was the only one who got chewed out. Gazing at Ophelia with those puppy dog eyes, he adds that he trusts his wife. She's blown away by how smoothly this guy can lie without even batting an eye. But Callian's glare is still ice cold and it's really freaking her out. The prince reminds her that he made it perfectly clear Ophelia was to stay away from the Countess, but she disobeyed and deserves to be punished. Sylvester wants to know what law prohibits greetings. After all, his wife has never been called out for anything related to Countess Fleur. And it's true. Thanks to the Duke's influence and ability to bend the rules, Ophelia's always gotten away with it. Callian thinks Duke Regan's statement is way too cocky, but Sylvester just smiles in response. In his opinion, it's way more natural for a duke to defend his own wife than for a prince to take the side of a married woman. Hearing that, Fleur bursts into tears again, outraged that Regan could say something like that. The girl runs off in hysterics because Sylvester's words hit way too close to home. Fleur had a fight with her husband, but she didn't divorce him. As the Earl's wife, she started seeing the Crown Prince and their thing really took off, but you definitely couldn't call that love beautiful or pure. No matter the situation, Fleur's still a married woman. The prince loses it and shouts that he's not gonna let them get away with this time. After saying that, he takes off after the Countess. Looking at the Duke, Ophelia notices that he seems pretty jazzed up, but Sylvester, looking tired, replies that even blind devotion has its limits. Meanwhile, Callian catches up to Fleur, grabs her hand and promises revenge on the Duke's family. Truth is, the prince's anger didn't just boil over when he saw the Countess crying. It started that morning when Ophelia handed him that letter. Judging by the handwriting, there was no doubt Callian's mother wrote it. The prince was overwhelmed with emotions, including some unpleasant ones, because he figured the letter was stolen, and Ophelia was behind it. That's why he's promising Fleur right now to take down the Duke and his wife, no matter what it takes. Looking him in the eye, the girl insists that she's not bothered by insults. But she does hate that the prince himself has had to hear a lot of trash talk because of her. Callian strokes Fleur's face, calling her a silly goose and not understanding how she can say she's okay. He declares that he can't not love the woman who saved him from death and took care of him, asking for nothing in return. Callian can't stand anyone who'd crush a soul as gentle as hers. Fleur's begging him not to, saying Duke Regan's the head of the noble faction, and messing with him is super risky. The prince is blown away again by how kind she is, worrying about him even when she's the one hurting. And so they stood in the forest for a while longer, just holding each other tight, not saying another word. Meanwhile, the Duke and Ophelia are already heading back to their estate. Our girl's bugged by that nasty jab the Crown Prince threw at her at the end there? Sylvester thinks it sounded more like a cheap shot from some back alley thug. What's really eating at him, though, is why Ophelia just suddenly clammed up like that. I mean, if she thought she was in the right, she should have stuck to her guns, but she started strong and then just stopped. Ophelia reminds the Duke that he's the one who told her to seduce the Crown Prince, and she was actually struggling to keep her cool. She thinks Sylvester's the whole reason the prince is so pissed off. But the Duke's saying that the more he protects his wife, the more likely Callian is to take notice of her. Ophelia's asking, then what was the point of threatening that night like that? Sylvester replies that the guy just had bad luck being the prince's servant. Suddenly she notices it's snowing and excitedly runs to the window. All of a sudden, memories flood back to the girl. Every day in the hospital, not knowing what was going to happen to her, filled her with the fear of death. It was hard for her to even breathe, but she prayed hard. And now, being able to breathe fresh air and enjoy life feels like a miracle. She's healthy now, so there's nothing to be surprised about. Ophelia's gonna snag the prince by straight up copying Fleur, then ditch Sylvester and live happily ever after. The Duke's thrown off by her weird vibe, but she just says she's changing things up from now on. She's gonna, win over the heir, and that's how she'll get her divorce. Sylvester finds that hilarious, but he's like, go for it, see if you can actually pull it off. And even though Ophelia's asking why he's egging her on again, the Duke just blows her off and throws a question right back. He wants to know what's gotten into his wife, 'cause she used to hate even talking to him. Ophelia reminds Sylvester that he's always hated her too. The Duke wants her to admit she never liked him either, and figures they're actually two peas in a pod. Then he grabs Ophelia's hand and promises he won't bug her with pointless questions anymore, 'cause he doesn't even care what happened. Sylvester just asks her to make him happy and kisses her hand. In that moment, it seemed to the heroine like the Duke was looking at her like a kid who just got a new toy. The thought that he was just playing games with her freaked Ophelia out, but a part of her wanted to believe she could still trust him. It's been a few days since that incident at the Imperial Palace. Callian, who threatened the heroine, has been suspiciously quiet this whole time. While the prince is keeping his mouth shut, Ophelia's decided to stick to her plan. So right now, she's sitting in her room, studying the blueprint for starting the orphanage. At the same time, she can't shake the feeling that she's taking something away from Fleur. At first, she even felt guilty, even though she didn't understand what for. This is her life now, and she needs to understand Fleur as a person, not just a character. Trying to block out all the random thoughts, she decides to laser focus on her plan. She's gonna watch Sylvester for a bit and drop the news on him when the time is right. But before Ophelia can even ask the Duke a question, he shuts her down without even hearing her out. He says she's got some pretty interesting ideas, but they're always so out there he's definitely not on board. After breakfast, she gets some news that completely throws her for a loop. Ophelia gets the papers, Callian suing her. She's surprised by how chill her husband is, like he thinks the whole thing is just fascinating. She thought he'd step up, take care of it, and promise to sort everything out. But Sylvester reminds his wife that she's the one being accused, and she's got to figure this out herself. Ophelia begs him for help, reminding him that he promised to do whatever she wanted. The Duke can't stop grinning, says he's really getting a kick out of the look on her face. He promises to find her a good lawyer and figures it'll just be a fine, which he's planning on charging to her account. Ophelia doesn't remember ever hearing about nobles getting fined before. The Duke laughs, pointing out she'll probably be the first noble to get hit with that kind of penalty. This whole thing is just throwing a wrench in her plans again. She was trying to build up a virtuous image by announcing the construction of an orphanage after all. Now, if Ophelia becomes the first person to get fined, her reputation is going to be toast. She needs to get that lawsuit dropped no matter what, and it looks like she'll have to play her trump card. Our girl heads into the Imperial Palace. Right away, she notices the way people are treating her is totally different. Damn, that Regan's family crest on the letter really carries some weight. Even that night Sylvester spooked last time is bowing to the Duchess like she's royalty. As our girl walks in, she can't help but notice how kinda plain the room is. Usually the parlor's like the estate's showpiece, you know, so they go all out, but this place is pretty basic. Ophelia also finds it weird that the furniture's kinda dusty. Maybe that's Fleur's doing, since she's not like those other fancy nobles, always keeping it low-key and avoiding the frills. Ophelia's getting a weird vibe, like something's not adding up. Maybe Fleur's playing it down on purpose, trying to look all innocent and different from the other high society ladies. She tries to shake those thoughts because they're all starting to feel kinda off. Callian walks in, announcing right away that he has to look at that awful face again. But his words don't faze the girl at all, because she's got a special weapon stashed away for the prince. Callian wants to cut to the chase, but warns her he's not dropping the lawsuit. The heroine smiles and says she's real sorry to hear that, because that's exactly what she came for. The prince coldly repeats his refusal. No matter what happens, he's not backing down. Ophelia thinks that's a real shame, seeing as she already sent the letter to the Empress. Callian's like, how the heck did she find out about that? I mean, after the letter was intercepted, they traced its origins and there were absolutely no leads. The prince demands to know where Ophelia found the letter and how she managed to swipe it. The heroine makes it clear to Callian she's getting bored with this conversation. The girl calmly asks if he really wants to know, and that starts to get under his skin. Keeping her cool, Ophelia drops the bomb that there's actually another letter, and she'll only hand it over if Callian drops the lawsuit. The prince hesitates, afraid to trust the Duchess, but she doesn't push it. The decision's all his, and if he wants proof the letter's real, he has to back down. After thinking it over, Callian sits down across from Ophelia and throws a counteroffer her way. She has to stay put for a month, and in return, he'll drop the charges against her. Since the Duchess wants to avoid a trial anyway, the prince is offering a compromise. He won't agree to the deal without that condition, and it actually makes sense to her. So Ophelia suggests Callian consider her under house arrest, but asks him to keep it on the down low. If she avoids trial, people will know she received royal punishment, and then it'll be the hottest gossip in high society. The prince wants to know when Ophelia started giving a damn about what people think. The Duchess says, from right now, and tells him to drop it. Then she gets up off the couch and announces that Callian's gonna have to wait a month to get the letter. Putting on a pathetic face, she reminds him that she can't leave the estate because she's grounded. The prince is absolutely furious that she's trying to play him, but there's nothing he can do about it. The heroine's looking real smug, enjoying his frustration. But now the girl's worried Callian might hate her even more, and figures she maybe needs to ease up. So she walks over to the prince and says she's got some intel for him. She says there's another one, a third letter from the Empress, and it's located in the imperial palace. Callian wants to know how Ophelia got intel on his mother's letters. She says the Empress herself asked her to hand them over to him sometime in the future. Then Ophelia says goodbye to the prince and promises to meet again in a month. Alone, Callian tries to figure out why his mother would do that, but he's drawing a blank. Sylvester greets his wife at the estate, saying seeing his love makes his heart race. He's surprised she went all the way to see the crown prince and happily accepted house arrest. Regina, though, isn't thrilled the Duchess bowed down to the crown prince. He thinks there's a real difference between following court protocol and just bending the knee to the prince's orders. The heroine's bummed out by his reaction, since she did the best she could. After a while, having thought it over, the Duke asks his wife what she plans to do at home for a whole month. And then Ophelia hits him with an even bigger shocker, 'cause she ain't planning on being a houseplant. Girl's got a ton on her plate, gotta check out some land, see how the people are doing, and figure out what the kids need. This month's gonna fly by, and she ain't about to chain herself to the house like she's under lockdown. Sylvester's initial surprise melts into a smile, 'cause he's actually stoked to hear that. He tells his wife to keep doing her thing, just like she should. When she asks what he means, Sylvester tells Ophelia to live her life exactly how she wants. He tells her to ignore the prince, ignore even him, and just do whatever the hell makes her happy. According to the Duke, you only get one shot at this life, so you gotta live it your way. His words totally throw her for a loop, 'cause it's clear he's not worried about the family image, he just doesn't want her feeling trapped. Maybe it's those thoughts, or maybe it's the open window, but something gives her the chills. Noticing this, Sylvester asks if she's all right. Ophelia admits she's just scared, 'cause it looks like living by your own rules ain't so easy. It's an awesome idea, but it feels so far off it's kinda terrifying. Truth is, she's really freaked out about waking up in a hospital bed again, and that's got her super anxious. Sylvester wants to know what's got his wife so scared, 'cause she's a duchess no matter what anyone says. He wants Ophelia to always remember that nobody better mess with her, and that she'll always be safe. At first glance, Sylvester's words seem kind, but deep down, he's probably plotting to use Ophelia again and scheming up a storm. But whatever his intentions, our girl's finally starting to think for herself and live how she wants. A couple days later, Ophelia throws on a hooded cloak and leaves the estate, ready to take the first step towards building that orphanage. Irene the maid can't figure out how she ended up in the city with her mistress. Lately, the girl thinks Madame's been acting pretty weird. Ophelia used to be totally different, and all the servants were terrified of her. One time, she even chucked a vase at a girl's head just because she didn't come running fast enough when she was called. But now Irene's facing a completely different woman who's offering her fruit with a sweet smile. This total change is making the girl even more scared to be around Ophelia. The main character looks around at the houses with interest, and even though they're not bad, they're too close to the main street. She thinks it would be a good idea to find that kid first, and to do that, Ophelia's trying to remember his name. According to the original story, he's 15 now, and he's got the potential to become a knight in the future. In the original story, Fleur saw the kid swiping bread from the bakery, felt bad for him, and decided to take him to an orphanage. Ophelia would love to meet him like that herself, but a villainess like her would never stumble into the same plot. So all she can do is hope that when she builds the orphanage, he'll come there on his own. Madam's plans to build an orphanage are incredibly inspiring to Irene. However, Ophelia doesn't miss the excessive tension in the maid's voice. And when Irene shrinks back like she's expecting a blow, the heroine realizes the girl is still terrified of her. She goes to the maid and asks for her forgiveness, even though she knows the apology is way too late. The Duchess promises with a friendly smile that she will never hurt Irene again. As a sign of reconciliation, she offers the girl her pinky, and Irene asks in confusion if the madam is okay. According to Irene, she's really worried about the Duchess because she's changed a lot since the day she came home soaking wet. She can't shake the feeling that Madam has become like a different person. Not only was she super nice to those designers, but now she's planning to build a shelter. Irene thinks the lady's seriously ill, but Ophelia's quick to tell her that's not the case. She explains she's had a major change of heart and now she's craving a better life. The heroine reaches out to the girl and she flinches again, like she's trying to dodge a blow. But Ophelia walks up to the maid and admits it was her fault for not trusting her. Irene freezes, totally confused, as the lady fixes the ribbon that came undone on her chest. Then the heroine swears on her family name that she'll never, ever hurt anyone again. And now they gotta get going, 'cause they still need to hit up a couple more spots. This is way harder than she thought it would be, and she wishes the original book had pictures, so it'd be easier to recognize the area. Plus, Ophelia's stressing about being under house arrest, 'cause even though she's trying to lay low, it'll be bad news if anyone recognizes her. Lost in the crowd, Irene accidentally got separated from the lady, and now she's yelling for her to wait up. Suddenly she trips and eats dirt, smacking her leg pretty hard. Ophelia turns around at the shout and sees a horse-drawn carriage barreling straight towards Irene. Before our girl can even react, some dude zooms past her like a freaking tornado. He's rushing to help the fallen girl and she instantly recognizes this green-haired kid. No doubt about it, that's the future hero. The very same 15-year-old she placed in the orphanage back in the original story. The horses are already rearing up, and Theo snatches Irene out from under their hooves just in the nick of time. He apologizes for shoving her and asks if she's hurt at all. Irene's totally mesmerized by her savior and thanks him for the rescue. Meanwhile, Ophelia's not just happy her maid's okay, she's stoked that she got to meet Theo. The heroine rushes over and thanks the guy too for saving the girl, who remembers she's absolutely not allowed to call the lady ma'am. Ophelia notices Theo's knee is busted up and bleeding pretty bad. The guy smiles and says it's just a scratch, no big deal. But the heroine gives him first aid and ties a handkerchief around the wound to stop the bleeding. She promises to pay for treatment because the wound will get infected if they don't do anything, and the guy humbly agrees. Ophelia looks up to see who that was, tearing along in that carriage at such a crazy speed. A man jumps out of the carriage, yelling and complaining about the sudden stop. Ophelia glares at him and tells him to check if everyone's okay first, before he starts yelling at people. She tells the man to act like he has some class if he's a nobleman, because someone could have gotten killed here. The stranger grinds his teeth in anger and calls the girl a loon. Ignoring him completely, she demands that the guards be called right away. But the people around them in the crowd, for some reason, look away and don't move an inch. Ophelia's trying to figure out why this kind of vibe suddenly filled the air. And then the guy who started all this announces he's Ilbert Reed, a vassal of the Regan family. He says with a nasty smirk that if the girl crossed him, she'd vanish into an alley, never to be seen again. But that smug grin quickly disappears from Ilbert's face because the stranger suddenly bursts out laughing. She says Duke Regan clearly made a terrible mistake hiring people from the bottom of the barrel. The crowd freezes in terror because everyone knows what Ilbert Reed is capable of. The insulted guy grabs for his dagger, ready to take care of these punks right now. He raises it above Theo, shouting they'd have been better off getting run over by a carriage. The blade flashed, coming down hard, leaving a bloody gash on Ophelia's arm as she dove to shield the guy. The sudden move knocked the hood off the heroine, and Ilbert froze, his eyes wide with terror. He'd seen that blonde hair before, belonging to Duchess Regan, a woman whose stunning beauty was only surpassed by her unbelievable ruthlessness. Ilbert dropped his dagger to the ground and fell to his knees before the Duchess. Irene stared in horror at her mistress's wound, but Ophelia, ignoring it, asked if Theo was all right. The guy, completely stunned, begged the Duchess for forgiveness. But Ophelia just smiled and said he had nothing to apologize for. His gratitude would be thanks enough. She was just glad he only got a scratch, which only made him blush harder. Theo realized this woman was someone seriously important, if even a nobleman like Ilbert was this scared of her. But to him, she's like an angel fallen straight from heaven. And even though the chaos in the city died down, a new problem popped up. The next morning, Ophelia was greeted by a Sylvester who was seriously ticked off. Towering over her, he demanded to know if she was doing this stuff on purpose. Earlier, on the way home, Irene admitted to Ophelia that she was totally shocked. It never crossed her mind that her mistress was capable of sticking up for someone like that. But what really threw the maid for a loop was that they had to pretend nothing happened when they got back. I mean, seriously, Ophelia's on house arrest, and if the prince found out she snuck out, she'd be in deep trouble. So she turned to all the witnesses and told them to keep their mouths shut, though it sounded more like a threat coming from her. Irene, who was still on the fence about her mistress's words before, was now completely convinced that Ophelia had changed. But the heroine was eaten up with guilt, wondering if she deserved such praise when all her actions were so calculated. Still, if people actually stopped fearing her, it was a no-brainer what she had to do. So she just smiled and thanked Irene for her kind words. Waking up the next morning, the heroine finds that all the newspapers are reporting on how the Duchess saved someone. Now all she can do is hope that Callian will turn a blind eye to it. As soon as she leaves her room, Sylvester greets her with applause. He admires his wife's ability to become the main topic of conversation yet again, even though she claims she didn't want it. The Duke's surprised because he was sure Ophelia didn't care if other people got hurt. But the heroine insists she doesn't take risks out of the goodness of her heart, because her life is too valuable for that. That kid saved Irene, and if they'd both died, the Duchess would be getting a lot of bad press. Even Sanctuary wouldn't have saved her in that situation, so she sacrificed herself for honor. Sylvester's glad to hear that. If it had been out of the goodness of her heart, he would have been disappointed in Ophelia. He's sure she'll cause their family a ton more trouble, but the heroine insists it's the complete opposite. Since the girl's in the news, she decides to capitalize on it and make Theo the face of the orphanage. Meanwhile, Ilbert gets unceremoniously tossed into the slammer. Towering over him, the Duke says in a stern voice that he's heard rumors about him harming his wife. Ilbert swears he didn't know that, or he would have groveled at the Duchess's feet immediately. But Sylvester needed a reason to get rid of a guy he used to need. The Ride family was constantly bleeding money. On top of everything else, they were mixed up in some shady dealings. The funniest part is they used all that cash they saved up to try and suck up to the Crown Prince. Just kicking them out would be too soft, so Sylvester's cutting off all support and aid to the Reed family. He's also about to issue a decree that Ilbert can never set foot on these lands again. The guy throws himself at the Duke's feet, begging him to hear him out and show some mercy. But Sylvester grabs Ilbert by the face and tells him he never should have messed with him. The Duke's eyes are shining with this evil glint, and he declares that the scumbag's gonna die. A couple of minutes later, Sylvester walks out of the dungeon, pulling off his bloody gloves as he goes. He's used to getting what he wants, and anything the Duke gets his hands on, he doesn't just let go. And nobody in the world ever dares to touch what belongs to him. Theo never thought he'd ever find himself in the Regan dukedom. Lady Ophelia walks towards him, and he stares, completely captivated by his savior. The Duchess smiles, saying she's been looking forward to seeing him again. Before sitting down for dinner, Ophelia invites her guests to enjoy tea and dessert. The guy blushes as he eats, reminding her of a puppy she's now going to take care of. Suddenly, Sylvester walks into the dining room and demands to know what this man is doing here. Theo, looking absolutely terrified, stands up to greet the Duke. Sylvester, looking grim, demands an explanation of what's going on. Ophelia tells her husband that this is the young man who saved Irene from being run over by a carriage, so she invited him to dinner. She says she's sorry that he didn't let her know he'd be back early today because she was just about to discuss something with him. Even though Ophelia suggests they all have dinner together, Sylvester declares that he didn't agree to this. He's losing it. Can't believe his wife just invites people over like that. She could have fed the kid later, right? All right, the Duke backs down, but he's demanding Ophelia cleans the guy up, says he doesn't meet their standards. She apologizes to Theo and asks him to give her and her husband some privacy. She's pissed. All her efforts to make a good impression are going down the drain. Sylvester just doesn't get what the big deal is. So Ophelia demands he explain why he's being such a jerk and making things so awkward on purpose. The Duke thinks she's the one acting weird, bringing some kid in from the gutter and inviting him to dinner. She reminds him the guy saved their maid, and she doesn't see what's wrong with being friendly. That's why Sylvester's giving his wife the stink eye, asking if she's doing all this to mess with him. He thinks her little games have gone way too far, and she's completely lost touch with reality. Leaning over the girl, the Duke asks if she doesn't think this kid, as she calls him, is a little too big. Ophelia should have been more specific about what happened, because Sylvester thought Theo was still just a baby. The heroine doesn't get why the Duke is upset that the guy turned out to be bigger than he expected. And then he tells her to think about how it looks from the outside that his wife brought a guy like that home. Still, it seems obvious to her that she wants to raise the guy and turn him into a great swordsman. She thinks it's forward thinking and demands Sylvester tell her straight up if he's implying something she's not getting. The Duke leaves, refusing to have dinner with them, and that throws the heroine for an even bigger loop. A while later, the maid tells her mistress that Theo's in his room and he's already bathed and changed. When Ophelia asks Irene what she thinks of the guy, she says he's pretty cute, kind, and innocent. The heroine expects rumors will soon start flying that the Duchess Regan rescued a lost soul and invited him into the Duke's house. People are gonna start saying Ophelia really did sacrifice herself to save some slum kid, and right now, this is a perfect way for her to ditch the whole villainous reputation. She walks into the dining room, hoping she didn't keep her guest waiting too long. The guy gives a sheepish smile and says he just got here himself. Ophelia's stunned at how different he looks just from a bath and change of clothes. She apologizes for her husband's awful words, but Theo says he gets it, and the Duke's reaction is totally understandable. And even though she suggests getting down to business, the guy asks her to give him a couple of minutes first. He holds out an envelope tied with rough twine to Ophelia and asks her to accept it as a gift. On the way to the duchy, Theo was lost in thought. He kept mulling over what people were saying around him. They were trying to convince the guy that the witch Ophelia was planning to lure him in and use him to summon a demon. Theo couldn't believe that this woman had specifically set him up just to exploit him. But even if it was true, he wouldn't have minded sacrificing himself for her. While Ophelia unwraps the gift, Theo says, embarrassed, that he feels bad about the whole incident that was his fault. The envelope contained crushed herbs that the guy himself had gathered and prepared for the Duchess. Suddenly, Theo realized how ridiculous his gift looked in the hands of a woman who could get any medicine she needed. He suggests throwing away this trinket that he dared to give to such a distinguished person. But then Ophelia suddenly turns away and silently walks over to the window. A moment later, the girl turns to Theo with a smile and, applying the herbs to her wound, thanks the guy for his concern. At that moment, he realizes that he was wrong to think of the Duchess as a witch who wanted to sacrifice him. All right, let's circle back. You got any idea why I invited you to this mansion? Look, I'm planning on building a shelter. That little stroll we took the other day? That was part of the deal too. And now I want you to stick around and be the face of this place. Dude's blushing like crazy. He can't believe it, thinks he's totally worthless. Ophelia's just smirking, watching him squirm. His self-esteem is seriously in the toilet. She puts her hand on his arm, tells him to chill out. She says he's earned her kindness, plain and simple. But this guy's stubborn as hell. He just won't take her up on the offer. Good thing he promised to hang around and think it over for a couple days. Gives me time to get my ducks in a row. Just as Ophelia was trying to convince Theo, Neil, her assistant, came running up to her. Out of breath, the guy announced that His Highness, the Crown Prince, had arrived at the estate. The heroine heads out to the garden, where Callian is already waiting for her. She's surprised by the sudden visit and asks what brings the prince to their estate. Throwing a rolled-up newspaper on the ground, Callian declares that everything is obviously going according to Ophelia's plan. The heroine has absolutely no idea what he's talking about, but the prince thinks she's playing dumb. He asks if Ophelia is happy that she got her way, since the emperor wants to see her. Emperor Kazentri Vilhas had long heard about Ophelia. It's not just that the Duchess is a notorious figure, with rumors about her spreading throughout the capital. Kazentri still remembers the previous Empress Margaret, who was very fond of Ophelia. After Margaret died, the girl kept up her wicked ways, but now she's suddenly changed. That's why the emperors decided to figure out what's going on, because it looks like something interesting's brewing. Irene's running up to the Duke to tell him that Neil was looking for him. Sylvester thinks his wife's up to her old tricks again, but the maid tells him something he never expected. His Royal Highness the Crown Prince is visiting their estate, and he's in the garden with the Duchess right now. Callian knows Ophelia snuck out of the house hiding her face, and then revealed her identity at the most dramatic moment. She gained the people's trust, and the news even reached the Emperor himself. The prince thinks his actions were playing right into Ophelia's hands from the start. Even though Callian's exaggerating, there's nothing wrong with the heroine having the Emperor wanting to meet her. After all, it's a fantastic opportunity to get his support. If Ophelia can sway the Emperor to her side, that's going to be the perfect shortcut to dodging a seriously bad ending. The heroine's grinning, thinking this kind of chance only comes around once in a blue moon. Callian misreads that smile as the nasty smirk of a calculating woman. So, he tells her to hold her horses, cause he's gonna make damn sure that meeting with the Emperor doesn't happen. Ophelia figures anyone can request an audience, but Callian says only folks with a pure heart and good intentions get in. The girl reminds the prince that he basically handed her proof of her good intentions earlier today. After all, she wouldn't risk her maid and some kid from the slums just for some long-shot scheme, would she? But turns out, that's exactly what Callian thinks she's doing. That sets her off, and she calls the prince a pathetic, small-minded jerk. Hearing himself insulted like that, Callian loses it and grabs Ophelia's arm. Even though he's got a death grip on her, the prince is chewing her out for even daring to touch him. The heroine's like, what is this guy even saying? Because as wild as Ophelia might be, she'd never lay a hand on the heir to the throne. Because Callian's got her pinned, the bandages come undone and he sees this gnarly, bloody scar on her arm. He recoils from Ophelia, totally freaked out, and asks her what the hell that wound is. She just glares at the prince, disgusted, and tells him it's all in the newspaper he brought. Callian's all sarcastic, figures it's just a show, that Ophelia probably cut herself for attention. But she's like, I don't give a damn about your fancy titles. This scar's a badge of honor. I got it saving a kid. The prince can't believe Ophelia's actually saying this stuff. For a split second, he almost thinks she's really changed. But he's too afraid to let his guard down, because then she might see an opening and stab him in the back. If you're done talking, Your Highness, I'll take my leave. Hold on a sec. Why didn't you reply to my letter? And if you trashed it on purpose, let me spell it out. You're staying put on this estate, or things will get unpleasant. Break that rule again and I'll bury you in legal troubles. Every single one I can find. Oh, I'm so scared, she says, dripping with sarcasm. I promise to be a good little girl. She grabs his pinky, like she's sealing the deal with a pinky swear. Callian recoils like he's been burned, yelling, Don't touch me! Funny, Ophelia shoots back. You grabbed me hard enough the other day that my arm still hurts? Fed up with the whole thing, the prince heads for the exit. But just then, Duke Regan shows up in the garden, having heard about His Highness's visit. Sylvester wants to know what brought Killian here, but Killian figures he doesn't need a special invite. The Duke says he'll let it slide just this once, seeing as the prince isn't just anybody. Callian makes a show of heading for the exit, since he's already said his piece to the missus. Turning back to the girl, he holds up his pinky and tells her to never forget their little agreement. The prince warns her he won't be so understanding next time. As the gates slam shut behind him, the Duke shoots his wife a nasty look. He suddenly notices the wound on her arm and asks her why she didn't say anything. He thinks Ophelia's gone too far, considering she swore she'd never sacrifice anything out of the goodness of her heart. The girl explains how that guy went for a dagger and could have hurt Irene and Theo. Sylvester tells her not to worry and promises to call a good healer to fix her right up. She yanks her hand back, saying she doesn't need a doctor. The wound isn't deep, but it's pretty big, and if it heals on its own, it'll leave a scar. People will see it and think she's not like the other noble ladies. Besides, for her, it's proof that her body's holding up. She doesn't want the wound to disappear because she wants to remember she's willing to put herself on the line for others. From now on, that scar will symbolize Ophelia's full and exciting life, and even though she didn't say all that out loud, Sylvester figures she wants to show off the scar. Just like she used that kid to get people to recognize her good intentions, now Ophelia's trying to build a reputation on scars. Sylvester laughs, saying even he couldn't pull off something like that. But when the Duke finds out his wife promised the prince she wouldn't leave the house, he's furious all over again. But Ophelia changes the subject, cheerfully reminding her husband about his promise. They had an agreement, after all. Every time the prince sends her letters or even shows up himself, Sylvester has to pay his wife. So she demands that the Duke fulfill his promise immediately. Sylvester thinks Ophelia's getting a little too fixated on the cash, but he promises to take care of it through Neil. Before she goes, she lets the Duke know that the Emperor's also keeping an eye on her. Sylvester gets lost in thought, and Ophelia catches the word weirdo in his mumbling. He quickly concludes that it's actually a good thing and asks her to let him know if the emperor summons her. Because if his wife goes to the palace, her husband absolutely has to escort her. It's obvious to her that Sylvester's got his own selfish reasons for this, and even though she definitely feels safer with him around, she can't just agree to it that easily. So she's saying she wants the emperor's undivided attention, and he might get distracted by the duke if he tags along. Since Sylvester's claim that the emperor is difficult didn't work, the duke's offering his wife some cash. And even though getting paid to meet the emperor sounds tempting to Ophelia, she tells her husband to come up with something more interesting. A few days later, having already partially carried out her plan, our girl realizes Callion's prohibition isn't so bad after all. Regent Manor is huge. You could wander around forever and never see it all. You could even get lost inside. The castle itself is a historical landmark, and there are treasures everywhere, like a museum. There are so many cultural artifacts around that Ophelia has plenty to study. Yesterday she was in the East Wing, the day before in the West Wing, and today she's thinking of checking out the annex. From Irene's reaction, our heroine notices her idea freaked the girl out, and she demands to know what's up. Looking at the maid's scared face, Ophelia reminds her that lying to her is pointless. That's when our girl finds out the West Wing is the master's private sanctuary, totally off limits. The Duke throws a fit if anyone even wanders close, so everyone gives that part of the mansion a wide berth. Irene suggests to the lady that they check out the South Wing today, says there's tons of paintings. But after hearing Sylvester's orders, Ophelia decides to head straight for his personal space, just to get under his skin. Approaching the West Wing, the heroine finds a completely abandoned building. She never imagined there could be a place like this on the estate, looking like some kind of haunted house. It just doesn't fit with the Duke's image. The guy's obsessed with being clean and tidy. Ophelia goes inside, and it's even worse than it looked from the outside. The layout's the same as the other wings, but it's covered in dust and cobwebs everywhere you look. Going up the stairs, the heroine comes face to face with a huge portrait of a beautiful dark-haired woman. Just then, the girl hears footsteps behind her. She turns around and sees Sylvester, who's pissed about her visit, yelling that this is going too far. The heroine explains she was just bored, and even though the Duke says he's not mad, she can see he's fuming. Sylvester tells his wife to get out of this building and quick, but she's curious about the woman in the portrait, who's clearly the Duke's mother. She insists a wife has a right to know these things, but Sylvester thinks Ophelia's better off not knowing a lot of stuff. The Duke kicks the heroine out and forbids her from coming here and digging around in all this anymore. Ophelia doesn't remember him ever being this on edge before. As she's about to head down the stairs, her heel breaks and she loses her balance and falls. Unbelievable terror for his wife flashes across Sylvester's face. Next thing you know, they're sprawled out at the bottom of the stairs, locked in this intense stare. Realizing the situation, she apologizes and thanks the Duke for catching her. Sylvester's like, could you maybe get off me? It's kinda uncomfortable lying under you on this hard floor. Once they're both up, he gets all weird and flustered, saying, the important thing is, Ophelia, you're not hurt. The girl's totally confused why this tough dude is acting so shy. Back in her room, she faceplants right onto the bed. She calms down a worried Irene, insisting that she's fine. But honestly, Ophelia's the one feeling awkward about Sylvester's totally teenage reaction. She doesn't get why he's acting like this, because if it keeps up, they might not even get divorced. If Ophelia ends up staying with the villain, it's game over. The whole story's gonna get so messed up, there's no telling what'll happen next. So the heroine asks Irene when her house arrest is up, and finds out it's just 1 week left. She asks the maid to help her get ready to go out. The Duke's at his desk, but he's totally zoning out, not even looking at the paperwork. The aide notices his boss is lost in thought and asks what's up. Sylvester wants to know if there's any word from the second prince, but Neil says he's probably busy fighting monsters up north. The Duke orders him to report as soon as there's any news. Then he asks Neil if he's noticed Ophelia hasn't been hanging out in the dark lab lately. The aide's noticed it too, but he doesn't see any harm in it. Still, it's bugging Sylvester, cause he's worried his wife's trying to throw him off, then pull some crazy stunt with that forbidden magic. Neil thinks that if that's the case, the Duke could use it as an excuse to get rid of Ophelia. The aide wants to know exactly what's bugging the boss. Sylvester says he just doesn't recognize Ophelia lately. She used to keep everyone at arm's length, but now she's suddenly changed, like she got struck by lightning. Although, maybe she did, considering she went for a walk in the rain recently. Sylvester feels it's his duty to figure out what's going on so he can be ready for her next stunt. But he knows he needs to chill out and not get worked up over every little thing when it comes to Ophelia. He decides for himself what he owns and what he needs to get rid of. Anyway, the Crown Prince's gaze, which was only ever locked on Lady Williams, is now a little scattered. It doesn't even matter why. That is, all that matters is finding an excuse. Once the public's opinion of the Crown Prince hits rock bottom, Sylvester's planning to put the second prince on the throne. We gotta get him on the throne no matter what it takes. That's the Duke's endgame. Meanwhile, the heroine, face hidden under her hood again, heads into the city with Irene. The maid's getting worried about her lady. This alley they're in looks kinda sketchy. Ophelia's thinking she should have studied up more on dark magic, could really help her protect herself. Finally, Irene spots the green awning her lady was talking about earlier. Since the place totally matches the description, Ophelia suggests they head inside. But as soon as they're in, some weird smell just smacks them in the face. Figures, this place is definitely not on the up and up. A big burly dude with a beard comes out and tries to shoo them away, saying they ain't got nothing for them here. Irene's all over him for being so rude to her mistress. This guy couldn't care less about manners. He's not expecting any princesses or duchesses here. Ophelia, cool as a cucumber, just drops the bomb that he's illegally selling monster meat. I mean, everyone turns a blind eye to eating monsters on the battlefield, but selling the meat in your shop? That's straight up illegal. According to the Duchess, if the Imperial Guard finds out, this guy is looking at 15 years behind bars, minimum. The shopkeeper demands proof because empty threats aren't gonna cut it with him. Instead of answering, Ophelia silently pulls back her hood and the guy's like, "Who the hell are you?" The Duchess is shocked he still doesn't know who she is. Even the lowlifes in the back alleys know her face. The girl introduces herself as the wife of Sylvester Regan, Lord of the Dark Alleys, and a dark mage. But she's not here to threaten the shopkeeper, she just came to buy some meat. Irene, with pure terror in her eyes, asks her mistress what she plans to do with the monster meat. She smiles, saying it'll be a gift for a very special someone. The prince and Fleur are eating, but Callion's strangely quiet, and she's worried he doesn't like the food. Without looking up from his plate, he says everything's fine. Later, Fleur wonders why Callion's completely lost his appetite lately. Even her warm hugs don't help him, and she really wants to help but doesn't know how. On her way out, Fleur runs into Sir Leon, who offers to get her an escort when he hears she's leaving. She declines, not wanting to pull anyone away from their duties. Just then, she notices a black envelope in his hands with a familiar seal, the Regan family crest. Ophelia tosses the shopkeeper a pouch full of gold coins. Besides the meat itself, she's interested in the stories going around among the merchants. The heroine knows what the Info Guild really is, and even though Sylvester's guild has more intel, she wants her own sources. Besides, Fleur from the original story bought monster meat here all the time. She was a regular at the Info Guild. The guy reaches out to Ophelia and tells her to call him Joseph. He promises to hook her up with the best cut of meat, but first, he needs to know what to call her. If he keeps calling her Lady, it'll raise eyebrows, so the guy suggests they come up with a nickname. The heroine says to call her Eugene, that's what she was called back in the real world. Joseph agrees, even though the name sounds kinda weird to him. When he asks when she's gonna kick off her plan, she just says it'll be soon. And until then, Irene will be coming here in her place. Joseph's surprised she's trusting a kid with something like this, but Ophelia insists she trusts the girl. The guy nods like, got it, and heads off to grab the stuff. Meanwhile, Irene's practically bawling, trying to tell the lady she just can't do it. She's freaked out about going to those shady alleys, says she could get snatched. The heroine asks the maid if tripling her pay would change her mind. Even though Irene's still looking scared, she's down with that sweet deal. The shop dude apologizes to the madam, says she'll have to wait cause they're all out right now. Irene's totally surprised at how chill Ophelia is taking the news. The lady's changed big time, cause the old her would have thrown a fit and made a scene. Now Irene's thinking if she keeps working for the Duchess, she could become head maid and rake in the dough. Then she plans on meeting a good dude, getting hitched, and living the dream. So, no matter what, she decides to stick by the lady's side. The lady Irene used to know was like, possessed, but now she's like an angel. Since they've got a little downtime, Ophelia suggests they grab a cup of tea. The girl agrees, and, unable to hold back, just throws her arms around her. The Crown Prince is sitting in his office, lost in thought. Leah notices the boss is down, and he's got every reason to be. That woman sent him another letter, saying she's planning to bring him something special. Callion wants to refuse to see her, but Ophelia might have another letter from his mother. If there's nothing important in it, though, he'll make her regret it. Meanwhile, Fleur's wondering why she keeps running into the Duchess. She doesn't get why this is happening now. It never used to be like this, and she can't let it keep going on. Ophelia and Irene are grabbing tea at a street-side cafe not far from that alley they were just in. A couple hours later, the prince gets word that Duchess Regan has arrived. Callian doesn't know what Ophelia's up to, but this time he's resolved to stand his ground. He wants to know what brings the Duchess here, and if it's not about the letter, the conversation's over. The prince is being so harsh, Sylvester looks like a saint in comparison, but Ophelia keeps it together and silently turns to her bag. She announces she's brought His Highness something he'll like way more than the letter, and opens the bag. Ophelia holds out a blood-smeared box to Callian. The prince thinks she's completely lost it. This time she's decided to bring a corpse to the palace. Without missing a beat, she replies that even though it's dead, it's not what His Highness thinks it is. The girl's betting he'll get it once he sees what's inside the box. Ophelia flips open the lid and presents the prince with some monster meat. Back in his soldier days, Callian was hooked on this stuff, ate it at least once a week. But ever since the prince landed in the imperial palace, it's been 2 whole years since he's had a taste. Snapping out of it, Callian yells at Ophelia, telling her that dealing monster meat is a big no-no. But the Duchess's whole vibe screams that she couldn't care less. If Callian rats this out to the imperial guard, they'll just get rid of the meat. But if he plays dumb and pins the blame on this woman, he might just get to eat it. The prince calls over a maid and orders her to get Ophelia's gift out of his sight. He tells her to take it to the kitchen and, whatever she does, don't throw it away. She giggles, pointing out that Callian seems pleased, but he denies it and tells her to get lost. Ophelia thinks the prince shouldn't be so cold to someone who brought him a gift. But he figures that's the only way to treat her and gives her 5 seconds to scram from the palace. Ophelia stops the countdown, saying she knows a guild that's outside her husband's reach. Mercenaries from all over gather there and share intel. Callian should know it's dangerous to make any moves without intel these days. The prince can't deny that, since he just felt that himself. He's keeping tabs on the Duke and the second prince and needs info, cause Sylvester's already got most of the guilds locked down. Ophelia can't reveal the guild's location, since they're super careful, so Callian's gonna have to work with her. When the prince asks what the Duchess gets out of all this, she says she's got a thing for him. Her behavior strikes Callian as so brazen and shameless that he jumps up, completely outraged. The prince accuses Ophelia of betraying Duke Regan, considering she's his wife. He tells her there's absolutely no way he'll ever fall for the Duchess, but she coldly tells him not to worry because she's not saying this to win him over. Honestly, she doesn't care if he rejects her help. The main thing is to make Callian believe she's capable of betraying her husband at any moment. And even though it might hurt Sylvester, he ordered her to attract the crown prince, so it's in his best interest. Ophelia stands up too, and declares that she thinks it's only natural to want what's best for someone you care about. Callian laughs and calls Ophelia completely messed up. The girl laughs back and confirms that she really is the best villainess ever. Back in the carriage, she orders the driver to wait a bit before leaving since she's really tired and wants to rest. Even though this day completely drained her, the girl actually managed to catch Callian's eye. Her supporting the prince could screw things up for Sylvester, but then again, the Duke's practically untouchable, the ultimate bad guy. The main thing is not to piss off her husband, which the original Ophelia did way too often. What's confusing is how she managed to push Sylvester's power to such extremes. Suddenly, the heroine hears footsteps approaching the carriage, followed by a knock on the window. Pulling back the curtain, Ophelia is surprised to find a smiling Fleur outside. She doesn't get why the girl who was just putting her down is here. With an angelic look on her face, Fleur apologizes to Ophelia for being rude and asks for a moment of her time. The heroine leans out the window and looks around nervously. She's torn between telling Fleur to get lost or teaching her a lesson while no one's watching. But the girl's begging with such an innocent face, Ophelia caves and lets her into the carriage. Settling across from the Duchess, Fleur admits she was pretty rough last time and apologizes again. Our girl asks if this means they shouldn't see each other anymore, cause if the prince finds out about their meeting, he'll be ticked off again. Fleur promises Callian won't find out about anything. Still, Ophelia can tell that behind that innocent smile there's a straight-up lie. Since she doesn't see the point in dragging this out, she decides to get rid of Fleur ASAP. But then the girl suddenly drops that she's heard the Duchess has been acting different lately. After a beat, she tells Ophelia that she's planning on splitting with the Count soon and marrying the prince. So, the girl wants the Duchess to come and give them her blessing. Fleur was born into a merchant family, not highborn, but they weren't exactly hurting for cash either. They always praised the girl, called her an angel. She never imagined everything could fall apart until her father's ship went down. In an instant, the family lost it all, even their food supply. The house reeked of booze, filled with shouting matches, crying, and angry faces. People's pity felt fake, like they were getting off on watching someone else's misfortune. One day, an older nobleman approached Fleur and offered to marry her, promising to cherish her forever. And even though it was awful, she didn't see much difference compared to the hell she was already living in. Maybe this was her shot to dodge a bullet, so Fleur said yes. The Earl married the girl, paid off all her family's debts, and now she had it all. Fleur's high-class status was admired, and once again she was an angel to everyone else. And then one day she found a wounded young guy in the garden, his hair shining like gold. Like she was in a daze, the girl brought him home and started taking care of him. Fleur quickly realized this was her destiny, and then found out the guy she saved was the crown prince. He called her his savior and asked her to be with him. That's when Fleur understood that she was special. Up until then, she'd been suffering, all for the sake of meeting this man. Being just a commoner and a countess wasn't enough for Fleur. She was burning with the desire to become empress. But later she met the Duchess, who looked like a real snow fairy. Seeing Ophelia's striking beauty and noble bearing, filled with the spirit of freedom, Fleur realized she couldn't win. But then the Duchess's incredible spite comforted the girl, because all of that only brought her and Callian closer together. Ophelia was tearing Fleur apart, but the prince was all over her, defending his girl. That's when she knew, no matter how gorgeous Ophelia was, she didn't stand a chance. Now she's sure you can't go back. And all the crap she went through was so she could shine someday. Fleur lifts her head and catches Ophelia's death glare. Smiling, the girl asks what's up, and if the Duchess is really gonna skip her wedding. She's expecting Ophelia to blow a gasket, 'cause she can't keep her anger bottled up. But against all odds, the Duchess calmly says it's worthy of blessing, and she'll gladly be there. Then she asks Fleur if that's all to excuse her because she needs to get going. It's only when the carriage rolls away that Ophelia finally loses it. She realizes the girl was trying to get a rise out of her and feels totally burned that she couldn't clap back. Even though the Duchess didn't lay a hand on Fleur, there's no guarantee she won't make stuff up again. In the original story, Fleur was a sweetheart, and these character differences are seriously giving Ophelia a headache. Finally, the heroine's carriage pulls up to the estate, and she can't wait to relax in her chambers. Sylvester greets his wife at the doorstep, noticing that she's noticeably late. Even though Irene told the Duke that his wife went to meet with the prince, he was still worried about her. Taking a look at his wife, he asks if everything's all right because she looks a little rough. As much as Ophelia wants to tell Sylvester everything, she feels like she shouldn't. But after a second of silence, it's like a dam breaks, and she tells him how Countess Williams barged into her carriage after a successful meeting with the prince. After blurting everything out in one breath, Ophelia freezes, surprised at herself. The Duke asks his wife if she hit Fleur, and she replies that she held back, even though she really wanted to. Sylvester's giving Ophelia props for that, but thinks they gotta watch their backs now, 'cause the Countess clearly just declared war. The heroine's wondering if the Duke knew what that woman was really like. He says he had a bad feeling about her, and his guts never steered him wrong. Seriously, thinking back to the original story, Fleur was no pushover. She held her own even when Ophelia was throwing shade, stuck to her guns till the end, and had some serious determination. The Duchess needs to ditch this wrong idea about Fleur, who definitely knows how to get what she wants. The next morning, Ophelia heads out to the training grounds where Theo's working out. Even though she's asking if he's having a tough time on the estate, the guy thinks he doesn't deserve even half of this. Theo thanks the Duchess for taking him in, even though he was a total jerk and turned down her offer at first. Then the guy tells Ophelia about how he's been killing it with his sword training. Word is, the Duke himself watched him train last time, and Theo thinks the Duke kinda took a liking to him. The kid's stoked that the Duchess is in such a good mood today. Out of the blue, the Duchess asks if he needs anything else. Theo's a little embarrassed at first, but then admits there's something she could help him with. Ophelia sprints down the hallway, wondering why she didn't think of this sooner. Theo confessed that his teacher gave him a textbook, but he can't read it since he never learned how. Ophelia bursts into the Duke's office so dramatically that Neil jumps out of his skin. Sylvester chuckles, saying it's been a while since his wife barged in on him like that. The girl rushes to the Duke, grabs his hands, and begs him for money for something super important. It took Sylvester a second to process what she said, 'cause he was too busy focusing on her suddenly touching him. The next day, the Duchess, accompanied by her husband and his assistant, heads into the city. The Duke's grinning. It's been ages since he's been to a place like this for personal reasons. Soon, Neil splits off, and this outing starts feeling a lot like a date. When Ophelia asks why they're here, Sylvester says his wife needs some new clothes. He thinks she's been dressing way too plainly lately. Sylvester thinks her outfits are, well, let's just say they're not doing her justice and might give the wrong impression. And even though Ophelia tries to explain she didn't ask for money for clothes, he tells her they can talk about it later. The Duke smiles and asks her to just spend the day with him. And since this guy usually gets on Ophelia's nerves, she's totally thrown off by his sudden change of heart. The atelier owner offers the Duchess all the hottest new items of the season. All those frills and lace. Seems like overkill for a girl, don't you think? The Duchess's outfits always get tons of buzz, so the designer's not gonna miss a chance to show off their dresses. Ophelia's not feeling any of these, but Sylvester keeps pushing her to buy everything in sight, so she just tells them to wrap it all up. Pointing at a dress in the window, Ophelia suddenly spots a kid plastered against the glass outside. The designer says this kid's been hanging around for days, staring in the window every morning. They've told him to scram plenty of times, but he always comes back the next day. Hearing that, the Duchess just bolts out of the shop. Sylvester's just standing there, totally confused. Out on the street, Ophelia sees the redhead kid scratching symbols into the dirt with a stick. To her question about what he was doing there, the kid just curtly replied, 325 gold. Since the Duchess didn't quite get what he was talking about, the boy explained that it was the exact price of the goods she'd bought. He'd been keeping a close eye on the staff and figured out exactly how much stuff the lady had picked out. Ophelia was surprised he knew the precise cost of the dresses. According to the kid, he'd been complimenting customers and getting the lowdown on the outfits for the last couple of days. They told him everything. Some even showed him their purchases, and that's how he started to get the hang of things. The boy also figured out how much the price went up with accessories, and that's how he came up with the exact calculations. And even though he was sure he'd calculated everything correctly, the Duchess suddenly declared that the boy was wrong. She said there were some pretty simple dresses that cost way more than dresses with a ton of accessories, and the price of an outfit wasn't just about the bling. Ophelia claimed his calculations were off because she'd spent 487 gold. The kid's bummed, admitting that's a pretty big screw-up. But hey, thanks to the lady, he knows how dress prices fluctuate, so next time his calculations will be tighter. The kid smiles at Ophelia and says he won't mess up again. Just then, she spots the Duke watching them, saying their little chat was intense. He bolted out of the store right after his wife because everyone who knows Ophelia was worried about the kid's well-being. Turning to the boy, Sylvester asks his name, and the kid nervously answers, Libert. Only now does the girl realize who she just met. According to the original story, Libert becomes the crown prince's strategist, and he climbs the ladder thanks to Fleur. He was a rock star in tons of fields, including military strategy and financial planning. He's a key player in Callion's rise to power. Thanks to Sylvester, Ophelia just bumped into a character who doesn't even show up until way later in the story. Meanwhile, the kid is totally stoked. He never dreamed he'd meet Duke Regan and his wife. Libert recognized the Duke and Duchess right away. Their reputation speaks for itself. There's even been a rumor going around that they rescued an orphan from the slums and took him in. Libert says he hangs out here in his free time because he's a huge bookworm. But sometimes the kid gets jealous of the academy kids he sees in their uniforms. He wonders what it's like to be a student and actually go to classes. What's it like sitting in classrooms packed with more books than you'd find in any bookstore? Libert's convinced that if he ever got the chance to study, he'd be the best student ever. Suddenly, the kid drops to his knees in front of the Duke and Duchess, begging them to take him back to their estate. He's begging to be taught anything and promises to pay us back big time. Not believing her luck, Ophelia tries to convince her husband to take the boy in, but the Duke thinks it's too much hassle. Giving his wife a stern look, he asks if she's planning on turning their estate into an orphanage. She insists that this kid is seriously smart. Sylvester admits their conversation was kinda interesting, but doesn't think it's enough. Libert's not bad for his age, but it's not enough to bring him into the mansion. The Duke's not sure if this kid is worth his time and money. Ophelia realizes Sylvester's right, since Libert's only shown his potential so far. And even though she really sees it, proving it is pretty tough. Plopping down right on the ground, Libert stubbornly declares he'll sit there until they take him. He knows he might never meet guys like this again, and this could be the only shot he gets in his life. The kid's shaking, begging them to believe that even if he can't prove it now, he's sure he can be useful to the Duke. Sylvester keeps quiet, and Libert notices a crowd starting to gather. You can hear the murmurs in the crowd, saying Duchess Regan is messing with the kid kneeling there. The Duke sighs and tells his wife she always has a soft spot for the oddballs. With that, he grabs the kid who's shaking like a leaf by the scruff of the neck. To everyone's surprise, Sylvester suddenly picks him up and says he'll let it slide because he's feeling generous today. Libert can't believe his luck when the Duke offers him a chance to prove himself. Ophelia's never seen Sylvester smile like that before, and she can't figure out what caught his eye. Meanwhile, the Duke suddenly announces that he has a fondness for the younger generation. When His Grace got back to the estate, Neil couldn't hide his shock seeing the young boy in his lord's arms. Sylvester put his assistant in charge and announced he intended to raise the kid. He chuckled, telling Libert that this uncle would be his babysitter, and advised him to listen and learn from him. After calming down a bit, Neil reported to his lord that he'd taken care of everything. Then he held out an envelope to the Duke, but Sylvester asked his wife to take it from the assistant. Taking the letter, Ophelia immediately recognized the seal of Grand Duke Panin's estate. The girl opened the envelope and found an official invitation from the mansion. She was incredibly excited about the opportunity to visit the estate where the former emperor's letter was hidden. Sylvester seemed like her own personal lucky charm today. But then, the Duke smirked and said that, according to his intel, Fleur Williams would also be at the reception. Later, lying in bed, the heroine is stressing out because she didn't think she'd run into the Countess so soon. After taking a good look at the letter, Ophelia realizes it wasn't meant for her at all. Sylvester swiped the invitation addressed to Lady Cardell and gave it to his wife. He suggested Ophelia use Fleur's own tactics against her. The heroine's already tired of going up against this girl, but now it's not just a simple case of good versus evil. Clearly, they've moved beyond the predictable storyline, and now Ophelia needs to solidify her standing. An unusual confidence suddenly fills her. She sees a path and knows she can make it work. Ophelia's gonna take all the good stuff that made Fleur seem like a saint, and this time, she's gonna be the one playing dirty. The next morning, Irene returns to the estate with the box her mistress sent her for. The girl says she was really nervous because of the way the merchants looked at her, but she toughed it out and got what was needed. Ophelia's giving Irene props, saying she knew she could count on her. The maid says Joseph was grumbling like crazy because it was a pain to get that gift for Duke Panin. Irene's blown away by how gorgeous her mistress looks, saying that new dress is killer on her. And even though the maid thinks Ophelia's got amazing taste, her husband actually picks out most of her dresses. Just as she's about to head to Duke Panin's mansion, Sylvester shows up in the doorway. He says Ophelia looks all right and asks if she dolled herself up to impress him. She replies that all she knows is her husband's got a great eye for fashion, and now she's got a role. Then, out of nowhere, the Duke announces he's going to the reception with her. He turned down Panin's invite last time, so now he's gotta go, even though he thinks it's a drag. Arms crossed, Ophelia asks her husband who he's trying to wow with that getup. Sylvester says it doesn't matter, because people will notice a well-dressed couple anyway. The Duke holds out his hand and suggests his gorgeous wife get a move on. Arriving at the location, Ophelia marvels at the mansion's grandeur. Besides, the weather here on the southern border is way different than in the northern Regan territories. The girl heard it's beautiful by the coast, but she won't have time for a walk since the reception's inside the estate. For now, she needs to get closer to the Grand Duke, so she asks if Irene put his gift in a safe place. The maid rushes off to find the coachman, which really surprises Sylvester. Hearing that Ophelia prepared a gift for Panin, he doubts the Duke will even accept it. After all, last time she tricked him into eating a salt crystal disguised as candy. Hearing this, our girl is determined to apologize to the Panin family. Sylvester's telling his wife that the Grand Duke was actually considering executing her back then. If Regan hadn't stopped him in time, Ophelia would be 6 feet under right now. So he's asking his wife again to remember everything he went through for her. The heroine says she's so grateful for his help, she just doesn't know what to do with herself. But Sylvester's grinning so wide, it's like he totally missed the sarcasm. The servant at the entrance checks the invitation and notices it's addressed to Countess Cardell. Ophelia reminds the guy who she is and says she's here in the Countess's place since she's feeling under the weather. The Duchess glares at the servant with such a nasty look that he agrees to let her in. Hooking her arm through Sylvester's, she gives a sweet smile and asks him to announce their arrival to the hosts. The Duke and Duchess proudly enter the estate as the guests whisper in shock at their unexpected visit. Ophelia can hear people in the crowd whispering that she stole the Countess's invitation, but she's trying to ignore it. Sylvester glances at his wife with a smirk and asks if she's planning on roughing him up. The girl replies that she just wants to get out of this hall as soon as possible. But the Duke starts pushing Ophelia's buttons again. Noticing everyone around them is hanging on their every word, she plays along with Sylvester. Ophelia says she's barely holding back from unleashing some serious dark magic on him. The heroine thinks it's weird that Pain isn't showing up at an event he organized. The Grand Duke is actually incredibly paranoid. Back in his younger days, he was in a war where he caught a nasty disease and almost kicked the bucket. After surviving that terrible experience, he became totally obsessed with his health. Ever since then, he's only let one person get close to him, and that's Sylvester. When the Regan family enters Pain's study, he jumps up to greet them, all smiles. When Sylvester asks how he's doing, the guy says his maid's been sick, so he's been stuck in his room to avoid catching whatever she's got. Suddenly, Pain spots Ophelia and can't hide how ticked off he is. The girl decides to play it cool, greeting him with a smile. Sylvester explains that he was originally planning to come alone, but his wife really wanted to get the Grand Duke a gift. Pain hopes it's not those salty crystals again, for crying out loud. Because if it is, no matter how much Sylvester begs, he won't let Ophelia get away with another stunt like that. Stepping forward, the heroine bows before the Grand Duke and sincerely asks for his forgiveness. Pain is shocked that the incredibly proud Ophelia Regan is actually bowing her head in apology to him. Out of nowhere, she says the Grand Duke reminds her of her dad, who she just lost, and she's really sorry if she went too far, trying to get close to him with her jokes. Pain thinks she's matured since they last met, and to prove it, Ophelia wants to give him a gift. Opening the box, the Grand Duke is surprised to find a dragon's fang inside. Sylvester knows how hard it is to get something like this, and Ophelia pulled it off without anyone even noticing. Handing Pain the gift, she tells him they have a kid named Theo. She says that because of him, she met a mercenary who'd been to the Dragonlands, and he showed her this fang. With a straight face, Ophelia lies that as soon as she saw it, she knew she wanted to give it to the Grand Duke. Pain's impressed by her thoughtfulness, and her sincerity seems totally legit to him. Turning away from the guests, he says Duke MacGuffin was a special person to him, and he's deeply saddened by his unfortunate demise. Since a guy can't just accept a super expensive gift like that, Ophelia agrees to ask him for a favor instead. And so, a little while later, our girl, with her maid in tow, is checking out the massive library at the Panin estate. When Irene asks what book they're looking for, Ophelia tells her they need Introduction to Curses. Just like the title says, this book goes deep into the spells from the world of dark magic. But the Panin family's known for healing magic, and they look down on the dark stuff. The former Empress hid a letter in this book and gave it to the Grand Duke as a gift. Since it came from the Empress, he couldn't just get rid of it, so they just stashed the book away somewhere. Ophelia's glad she managed to gain the Duke's trust, and patching things up with his wife would be a plus, but she decides to worry about that later. Our girl's wondering why the Empress went to such lengths to hide those letters. The contents of those messages must be seriously messed up. Finally, the girl finds the book she needs, but when she reaches for it, it falls right on her forehead. Ophelia opens the book and finds a letter. Our girl is stoked about this chance to boost her rep with Callian. Suddenly, Ophelia's attention is grabbed by what's actually in the book. It says dark magic is witchcraft that draws power from the monster realm, and there are 2 ways to fire it up. First, you can strike a deal with an entity from the demon dimension. Second, you can make a sacrifice to get the power, and the sacrifices are pretty straightforward. We're talking about emotions, which become both the source of the magic and the sacrifice, a real delicacy for demons. I mean, demons live by feeding on human emotions. The girl's thrown by this because she doesn't remember any of this being in the original story. Ophelia first tapped into dark magic when she lost her father and was drowning in grief. So, she basically made a deal, sacrificing her sorrow to get it. And that sorrow was so intense it actually let her summon a demon. So, the way she sees it, she needs to crank up the emotional intensity to use the magic again. She tries to fake being pissed at Sylvester to test it out, but it's a total bust. Irene catches Ophelia in the middle of this ridiculous charade. Totally freaked out by what she just saw, she asks if the Duchess is all right. The Duchess tells her to forget everything she just witnessed, and then she bolts out of the library with the book tucked under her arm. Back in the hall, Ophelia suggests Irene grab a bite before they hit the road, since they're all done here. But just as she's about to chill and enjoy the peace, Fleur, who she completely spaced on, walks into the room. Ever since the Countess showed up, this place is suddenly buzzing. Ophelia tries to use the chaos to slip away without running into Fleur, but then she hears someone order her to halt. Turning around, the girl sees the furious Duchess Panin standing there, pissed about the unexpected visit from the Duchess Regent. Everyone around tenses up, like they're expecting Ophelia to pull some stunt, but instead, the girl bows her head to Duchess Panin and meekly apologizes. Ophelia knows that the woman got into trouble because of her last time, and that's why she's offering a sincere apology. But the Duchess isn't buying the shameless girl's phony excuses, not after she stole the Countess's invitation. On top of everything else, she accuses Ophelia of cornering poor Fleur. While our girl's trying to figure out what she's talking about, Lady Williams rushes forward and takes the blame. According to Fleur, the Duchess just gave her a stern talking to and put her in her place. Tearing up, she claims she's just a regular girl from a humble background, and being seen with her would be a total embarrassment for the Crown Prince. Ophelia can't believe what she's hearing and insists she never said anything like that. Duchess Panin accuses her of being arrogant and is outraged that she dragged the Crown Prince into this mess to tarnish the Countess's honor. Sylvester finds his wife's actions fishy. She randomly got an invite, already had a gift for the Grand Duke, and casually wandered off to the library. It's like Ophelia had an agenda from the start, and the Duke wants to know what she needed that she didn't tell him about. Passing by the banquet hall, Sylvester notices some commotion going on. He sees Duchess Panin forcing his wife to repeat to her face what she supposedly said to Lady Fleur. But Ophelia sticks to her story, saying she didn't say anything and doesn't understand why the Countess is acting this way. She calls out the Duchess for pressuring her without any proof and asks her where's the justice that the Panin family always brags about. Ophelia genuinely doesn't understand how she can be accused based solely on the Countess's word. Out of nowhere, Fleur drops to the Grand Duchess's feet, admitting Lady Regine didn't say anything at all. With tears in her eyes, she says she can overlook the harsh treatment and insults, begging them not to blame Ophelia. Our girl's floored by Fleur's little performance. But Panin refuses to believe her, saying he doesn't trust the rumors that Ophelia's actually changed. She's just so done with people trying to screw her over, even when she's minding her own business. Emotions are boiling over, a dark shadow flashes across the floor, and dark magic starts crackling around Ophelia's hands. The rage burning inside her suddenly vanishes, replaced by this crazy lightness in her body. It feels like a huge weight's been lifted, and Ophelia's thinking about unleashing that dark magic on her opponent. She walks up to Fleur, eyes blazing, and raises her hand over the girl who squeezed her eyes shut in terror. But Sylvester rushes in, grabs his wife's hand, and catches her as her body momentarily gives out. Holding Ophelia close, he's stunned, wondering how she dared to use dark magic. The heroine lowers her head and says it wasn't her choice. Duchess Panin steps forward, declaring that this witch tried to harm the Countess. Sylvester, keeping his cool, retorts that she should know what drove his wife to use dark power. According to Panin, Ophelia insulted Fleur, and she wanted to teach her a lesson, and it's beneath the Duke to get involved in women's squabbles. Sylvester immediately shoots that down. He thinks Ophelia insulted the Countess? His wife's been by his side all day and hasn't even seen Fleur. As the Duchess is about to argue with Sylvester, he gives her a cold look, asking if she's accusing him of lying. Panin instantly backs down, claiming Duke Regan couldn't possibly lie. The woman helps Fleur up from the floor and, turning to Ophelia, adds that she won't let this go. On the way home, Sylvester suggests his wife gets struck by lightning again. Maybe then she'll finally chill out. She thinks that's a pretty low blow, especially since she really wasn't planning on using magic. According to the Duke, dark magic messes with your head and it's easy to lose it. He reminds her that Ophelia has always hated the Countess. She repeats again that she honestly didn't do anything bad to her today. The Duke, looking his wife in the eye, suddenly says he knows she's telling the truth. Sylvester asks her to stick close to him from now on, since he can at least help her keep it together. She wants to know what he gets out of stopping her from losing her mind. Besides that, she's curious if Sylvester cares that demons are snatching people's emotions as offerings. The Duke smirks and asks if she's planning on offering him something, then immediately says no, claiming Ophelia doesn't have anything he'd want. The next morning, our heroine gets ready to head to the palace to meet the Crown Prince. She's convinced that despite what happened yesterday, Callian won't be able to back out of seeing her. Irene can't help but notice that lately, just looking at her mistress sends shivers down her spine again. Meanwhile, the prince learned about what went down at the Grand Duke's reception from more than just the newspapers. Fleur told him how terrified she was when Ophelia tried to use some dark arts on her. Callian's kicking himself for trusting that crazy woman even a little bit. But he still needs Ophelia because she has a letter from his mother. The prince is informed of the Duchess's arrival and tells them to make her wait. A little later, when Callian enters the drawing room, he's met with a scene he definitely wasn't expecting. Ophelia's sitting on the couch, bawling her eyes out. Seeing the prince, she throws herself at his feet, claiming she made a huge mistake. According to her, she couldn't stop the dark magic from activating on its own. She lost control of her emotions and ended up treating the Countess terribly. Sobbing, Ophelia says she wanted to apologize to Fleur in person, but she's scared of losing control again. She claims she's afraid of herself, and then Callian, handing her a handkerchief, tells her to stop crying. He thinks none of this sounds like Ophelia at all, and he doesn't like it one bit. Clutching the handkerchief, the Duchess says she can't stop thinking about what happened yesterday. Then she adds that she's considering going to the temple, which completely shocks Callian. Ophelia continues, saying that maybe the temple can help her control the dark magic, even if it costs a fortune. The prince flat out refuses to continue this conversation and declares that he's against it. Honestly, she was expecting him to say that, seeing as the Empire and the papacy are always at each other's throats. And if Ophelia suddenly switches sides and teams up with the priests, the imperial family is going to be in deep trouble. She keeps pushing the point that since she can't meet with the Countess, she has no choice but to rely on the temple for help. But Callian's so against it, he'd rather Ophelia just not control her powers at all. Everything's going according to her plan, so she agrees to do whatever the prince tells her to. She spins a tale about spending the whole day with her husband, greeting the Duke, and then running into the Duchess, who totally misunderstood and thought she'd insulted the Countess. But Callian calls her out on it, saying Fleur already came to him yesterday and told him what really happened. Trying to prove she's innocent, Ophelia suggests the prince check with the librarian about her visit. She repeats that she wants to apologize to Fleur, but Callian tells her not to stir up even more trouble. Ophelia's pleased, because she managed to plant a tiny seed of doubt in his mind with her tears, which shocked him more than she thought they would. The prince reminds her not to go to the temple under any circumstances, then asks if there's another reason for her visit today. The heroine hands Callian another letter from his mother. You can see on the prince's face how much he'd been waiting for this. Callian asks Ophelia about the third letter, the one hidden in the imperial palace. The girl lies, saying she doesn't know its exact location, and notices the prince's vacant stare, like he's about to tear the whole place apart. But Ophelia knows it's no use, because the letter's hidden where he'd never even think to look. Getting ready to leave, the girl asks if Callian wants to thank her. Since he refuses, she smiles and says she hopes that one day he definitely will. Neil excitedly runs to Ophelia to announce that the perfect locations have been found, and Libert echoes his words. The assistant asks the Duchess to take a look at the 3 proposed options, and the boy repeats after him again. Turns out, Libert's still working on his manners, so Neil's making him repeat after him to learn. The heroine asked Sylvester for more cash to get the orphanage built. Fleur did it in the original story, but Theo just reminded Ophelia about that. It's the least the heroine can do for the future swordmaster and Libert. Neil's showing the Duchess a map with what he thinks are prime locations. Yeah, they're next to the slums, but they're not too far from the main shopping drag. Ophelia suggests a spot on the wasteland, which she thinks would be perfect for the kids to play. Neil's blown away by how much she cares about the kids. He's starting to think she really did get struck by lightning, but she jokes about using magic to actually strike him with lightning. She decides to go with that spot and suggests putting up a statue of the Emperor across from the orphanage as a sign of respect. The assistant's surprised by this idea and figures the Duke probably wouldn't be down with it. The girl just laughs it off, says she doesn't sweat it, 'cause Sylvester's opinion never mattered to her anyway. Truth is, our girl totally expected her hubby to flip out. But when the Duke hears about it, he loses it, calls her nuts, and says there's no way he's signing off on that. The duchy's been building up its power for ages, and the Emperor's influence ain't what it used to be. Ophelia knows damn well the whole world will be blown away by the Regan family's loyalty if they put up that statue. She reminds her husband that he was the one who wanted to meet with the Emperor. The girl insists they just gotta show the ruler some good old-fashioned loyalty. Sylvester thinks this idea is so off the wall, he's speechless. When his wife asks if he knows what the Emperor's goal is, the Duke says, duh, he wants to grab more power. Ophelia says the imperial family's been slowly gobbling up smaller territories one by one. They're quiet now, but who knows how long they'll keep up this act of being peaceful rulers. She's asking the Duke, if the ruling family decides to come down hard, which family does he think they'll target first? A question like that would shake anyone up, and you can see on Sylvester's face how worried he is. Looks like he still hasn't figured out what the Emperor is really like. Ophelia doesn't see anything special about a regular statue in an orphanage, and even though the Duke is considering showing some good faith to lower the Emperor's guard, they can't keep up the charade forever. Ophelia's words hit like a bolt of lightning when she tells her husband they need to worry about the present situation, since he already made a deal with the second prince. The girl asks if she understands correctly that Sylvester traded independence from the Empire for help with the throne. The Duke grabs his head, not understanding what's happening. If the emperor actually draws his sword, God only knows what'll happen, and in that case, Ophelia's plan is a good one. But he's gotta know, how does someone who doesn't even care about politics know so much? When he asks how she knows his plans, she just says it's all thanks to her brilliant mind. Sylvester waves it off, tells his wife to stick to the plan, just like they agreed. If the emperor takes notice of our family, honestly, that might even be a good thing. Now that the location for the orphanage is set, all that's left for her is to wait, enjoy her happy life, and soak up the sun. And just when she's looking forward to a peaceful, uneventful day, Irene bursts into the room, and it looks like her good mood is about to be ruined. The maid hands the Duchess a letter from Jasmine Smith. In her letter, she apologizes for being so forward and says she felt she just had to write to Ophelia again. Her family recently came across a truly exquisite gemstone. As soon as Jasmine saw it, she immediately thought of the Duchess's gorgeous hair, told her father, and he agreed to gift the stone to Lady Regin. So, Jasmine's asking to visit Ophelia personally and give her a gift. The heroine's surprised the girl didn't just show up, but Irene explains that's a no-go. If the young lady came to the estate without permission, the master would flip his lid. Ophelia wonders what Irene really thinks of her, and if she's scared of her. But according to the maid, she's not afraid of Ophelia at all anymore, and knows she's a good person. And now, a couple days later, Jasmine's standing in front of the Regan estate gates. Even though she wants to turn around, she needs to get on the Duchess's good side and get her support. Stepping into the estate, Jasmine tries to pull herself together because her family's fate is in her hands right now. The girl walks into the living room, where the Duchess is already waiting for her. Jasmine sits down across from her, modestly lowering her head. Ophelia asks Lady Smith what brings her here, and the girl flinches. Her reaction confirms what she suspected. She's here on a personal mission. Jasmine struggles to find the words, unsure if she should just tell the Duchess she came to thank her. But she's afraid things will go south if Ophelia catches her in a lie. The girl decides honesty is the best policy, and it'll show the Duchess she's sincere. Jasmine, trembling, admits that her family is in deep trouble. Their main source of income, the mine, has dried up completely, and they're on the verge of going bust. The workers are pissed about the late paychecks, and there's talk of them storming the mansion. With tears in her eyes, Jasmine confesses she's really sorry for showing up with this gloomy scheme to get the Duchess's attention. Ophelia silently gets up from her seat and walks over to the girl. Reaching out, she lifts Jasmine's head, looks her in the eyes, and promises to help. There are some people who really need to make things right with Ophelia, and this sweet kid is apologizing, even though she didn't do anything wrong. The Duchess says she appreciates that Jasmine didn't lie to her because she can't stand lies. She promises to talk to her husband about it, but if she can convince him, Ophelia wants something in return. The girl promises to give her anything she wants. Our girl offers to get the sweet kid a new dress. She says with a smile that from now on, Jasmine will be her assistant. She's planning to ask the Smith family for that abandoned mine. She remembers this whole situation from the original story. Fleur felt bad for the Smiths and bought the mine for a steal. Turns out she hit the jackpot and got rich off a ton of diamonds. The Earl's family's still gotta sell the mine, and since Ophelia feels for them, she plans to try and share some of the wealth with them later. The heroine stares intently at Jasmine, who reminds her of a little squirrel. The Duchess smiles as she tells the girl she's still using the bookmark she put in her last letter. It's been 2 months since that letter, and considering Ophelia's reputation, Jasmine figured she'd have burned it long ago. Maybe the rumors aren't true, and the Duchess really isn't as awful as everyone says. The girl thinks everyone's wrong, and if people saw how kind the Duchess is, they'd take her side. Jasmine promises to help Ophelia get rid of all the dumb rumors and misunderstandings. With the Duchess's help, no one will dare look down on her anymore, and then she'll stand up for her and help her out too. The heroine digs this girl's ambition and how real she is. Jasmine vows to do everything in her power to make damn sure whatever happened at the Grand Duke's estate never happens again. When asked if she believes Ophelia is innocent, the girl replies confidently that she absolutely has to believe her. The carriage pulls up to Madame Yona's boutique, and Jasmine can't believe the Duchess brought her to such a fancy place. Ophelia invites the girl to go inside and pick out something nice for herself. That evening, lying in bed, the heroine replays the day's events in her head. It feels like she's finally found a friend in Jasmine. In her past life, she never had any friends at all because of her illness. Ophelia's pulled from her pleasant thoughts by Irene bursting into the bedroom. The maid's crying, totally lost as to how Madame could go somewhere without her. The heroine finds Irene's over-the-top reaction pretty amusing. She calms the girl down, explaining that Jasmine helps her out in social situations, and she takes care of her back at the estate. Still, Irene's bummed out, like she's losing her mistress. The heroine's really grown fond of the kid and hopes they can stay cool even after she leaves the estate. She wonders if Irene would stick by her if she ended up with nothing after the divorce, but Ophelia decides to keep that to herself. Suddenly, the maid remembers the Duke was looking for her and figures they need to have a chat. The heroine was expecting this, seeing as how she blew through all that cash in his name today. And now, Sylvester's giving his wife the cold shoulder, pointing out she really went on a spending spree today. Ophelia's surprised he found out about it so fast. The Duke just smiles and stares at his wife, waiting for her to figure it out herself. Just by looking at him, she knows her husband sent someone to tail her. He says Ophelia's been acting suspicious lately, but hasn't actually done anything, which just makes it even more sus. Walking up to his wife, Sylvester asks why everything's going so smoothly when she's barely lifting a finger. Pulling an envelope from his inside pocket, he announces that they've landed a big one. The Emperor sent them an invite for tomorrow. Sylvester only ordered the statue work to start yesterday, and the Emperor's already reached out. Clearly, he's keeping a close eye on their family, so they can't just sit on their butts. The Duke wants to know what his wife is up to. She's doing stuff she's never done before, recruiting talented people and finding herself a new assistant. According to Ophelia, Jasmine is needed to attract the prince, because the girl can help clear her name. As for talented people, we need them to get the Emperor's attention. If Ophelia can get His Majesty's backing, at least she won't be facing the ultimate penalty. Sylvester fires back, saying that he protects his wife, and no one in the entire kingdom would dare lay a hand on them. He tells Ophelia not to talk crazy and insists that she's not going to die. And even though she hopes that's true, the original ending still freaks her out, especially since Fleur has openly declared her an enemy. With a sigh, she suggests to Sylvester that they just get a divorce, thinking it'll be better for both of them. The Duke doesn't understand why she's rushing the divorce, and Ophelia repeats that she doesn't love him. Hearing those words, Sylvester freezes, and he feels his fists clench with anger. Getting a grip, he asks if she loves the crown prince. Ophelia smiles and replies that she's not sure if it's love. Sylvester's thinking she's got it bad for Callian, more than for him anyway. She can tell he's pissed, but the Duke denies it and just tells her to get lost. The guy turns away, and Ophelia's even more convinced he's fuming. Sylvester snaps, saying that's not it, and he says it with so much venom that she scrambles to get out of the office. The Duke just can't figure out why Ophelia's suddenly changed so much and why she's in such a hurry to leave. The thought that she's hiding something from him is eating him up. It's probably nothing, but for some reason Sylvester just can't shake it. The Duke, Neil, and Libert are waiting for Ophelia, who promised she'd be down soon. And finally, the girl shows up on the staircase in a killer emerald dress. Sylvester's so blown away by how hot she looks that he can't take his eyes off his wife for a minute. Ophelia takes her husband's arm and heads towards the carriage. Feeling his gaze on her, she looks up and meets the Duke's eyes. Sylvester looks away, feeling like he's about to lose it. The Duke stays silent the entire ride, avoiding Ophelia's gaze. She can tell he's still ticked off from yesterday's talk, but she doesn't get what exactly set him off. She speaks to the Duke, and only after the second try, when he finally reacts, she asks if he's mad. Arms crossed, Sylvester says it's like the 100th time he's had to deny it. He says he's just a little annoyed, and when Ophelia asks what's bugging him, the Duke tells her she's the reason. Since that was already obvious to her, she wants to know what, specifically, she did. The Duke chuckles, wondering why she can't just shut it if she already knew the reason. Spotting his smile, Ophelia playfully says the first one to laugh loses the argument, and since he lost, he should stop sulking. Sylvester realizes his wife tricked him. He smiles and admits he's got a lot on his mind, since this road leads straight to His Majesty. Ophelia's surprised the Duke's already met the Emperor, and she wants the deets. Turns out it was when Sylvester inherited the title, and the Emperor was the first one immune to his charms. The Emperor looked at him, puzzled, and asked what he'd get from him without his abilities. Sylvester retorted that he'd take his life, 'cause back then he thought he was the baddest dude on the planet. Even though Ophelia doesn't get how he survived that, the Duke says he's tougher than she thinks. After all, he's the one who fought monsters up north, while his wife sometimes looks at him like he's a total nobody. The heroine can't picture this brainiac type throwing down with brute force. Sylvester picks up on her doubt and promises to show his wife what he's capable of at the upcoming hunting competition. The girl remembers how Fleur and Callian's feelings for each other really took off during those competitions in the original story. With a sly grin, Sylvester announces that Ophelia will be going with him. After a while, the carriage pulls up to the palace, and the Duke and Duchess are walking down the hallway to an audience with the Emperor. Sylvester warned Ophelia that there's only one rule in this palace: no noise. Now, only the wind can be heard within the walls of the Mad Emperor's palace. Hearing the guests whispering, the butler asks them to keep it down. The doors finally open, and the first thing the Emperor says is how surprised he is at the woman Sylvester married. Kezentri invites the guests to sit down because they have a lot to discuss. Up close, the Emperor looks seriously intimidating. Sylvester's trading barbs with His Majesty, and it's making Ophelia even more uneasy. The Emperor heard a rumor they're building a statue of him in the orphanage courtyard, and the Duke confirms it. Sylvester immediately chimes in, saying it was his wife's idea. The girl realizes this is her chance to show the Emperor what she's made of. She explains that building the school for orphans was her idea too. According to the Emperor, Ophelia Regan is known for her accomplishments, and he's heard her name plenty of times. Before she can thank him, Kezentri adds that some folks say she's a real piece of work who's been stirring up trouble. Without missing a beat, our girl points out that the Emperor probably doesn't buy into gossip, since he's got bigger fish to fry. Kezentri remarks that she and the Duke are a real match since they even talk alike. Word is, the birds are telling him that the wicked witch Ophelia Regan is a changed woman. She's rescuing kids from the slums, building an orphanage school for them. And now, on top of everything else, the dame's planning to erect a statue to the Emperor, and he's wondering what the hell they were thinking. Scared by his freaky-ass expression, Ophelia replies that His Majesty knows this better than anyone. Turning to the Duke, the Emperor suggests he pledge his loyalty. But Sylvester claims he's the leader of the aristocrats, and he can't show His Majesty that kind of respect. The Emperor gets that the Duke wants to be an ally, but not publicly. Still, building a monument is definitely a public move. Grinning, Sylvester replies that means His Majesty should pony up some cash too. According to the Duke, he needs cover with the nobles. Ophelia's tired of listening to her husband, who warned her to behave herself, argue with the Emperor. Kezentri laughs, saying Sylvester's too arrogant and slick, he's got no chance against him. Turning to Ophelia, he thanks her for making the first move and preventing a power struggle. The girl replies that as a subject of the Empire, it's only natural for her to show loyalty to His Majesty. Suddenly, the Emperor declares that Empress Margaret had a good read on people, and she was close to Ophelia. Just then, a bird flies off the Emperor's shoulder and heads straight for the girl. And then Kezentri adds that if he'd known how sweet Ophelia was, he would have set her up with Callian. Sylvester, eyes flashing with anger, puts his arm around the girl's shoulders and reminds the Emperor that she's his wife. The Emperor retorts that he knows Ophelia fancies the prince. When the Emperor asks if this is true, the girl fearfully answers that it's possible. Kezentri frowns and glares at Ophelia, who under his pressure admits that he's absolutely right. The heroine feels a bird land on her shoulder. The Emperor laughs. Even his favorite little guys seem to like this girl. Ophelia's thrilled she managed to get the Emperor's attention like this. Lost in her happy thoughts, she doesn't notice the way Sylvester's looking at her right now. The audience is finally over, and Ophelia can finally breathe easy. But Sylvester's thoughtfulness and silence strike her as pretty weird. When she finally gets the Duke's attention, he says the Emperor's totally lost it. And he's wondering what that says about Ophelia, a woman who's gotten so friendly with this oddball. The Duke reminds his wife how she said she didn't like Callian, but the Emperor was happy to set them up. Ophelia says she was so scared of His Majesty, she thought he'd bite her head off if he heard her disagree. Sylvester finally kissed up to the Emperor, and that should be enough for him right now. The Duke says he's just in a mood, but Ophelia's wondering why that's her problem. She wasn't even planning on saying that out loud, but the words just slipped out. Sylvester finally cracks a smile and admits he sometimes wonders what's going on inside Ophelia's head. Looking at him, she just can't figure out what's been up with him since yesterday. She reminds Sylvester that he himself promised to divorce her if she seduced the Crown Prince. I mean, if you look at it that way, what happened today could be considered a win. Ophelia demands the Duke answer if he's planning on, going back on his word. Sylvester doesn't say anything, just coldly tells her that Callian's standing right behind her. But seeing the Duke with Ophelia, the prince immediately turns around and hurries off in the other direction. After agreeing with Sylvester to talk later, our girl bolts after Callian. The prince stops dead and demands to know why Ophelia's following him. Putting on her best innocent act, she says she just wanted to say hi to His Highness and see how he's doing. Callian replies that he's doing just peachy and asks her to leave him alone. Catching an unusual edge in his voice, Ophelia figures out he's got a rendezvous with the Countess. She claims she's quick to pick up on stuff like that. Since the girl got a little too close for comfort, he jumps back like he's been burned. Ophelia's ticked off by his reaction to her wanting to just chat, so she decides to mess with him a little. With that same innocent look, she mentions she just had a meeting with the emperor. The prince, who barely sees his own father, is super surprised that His Majesty summoned the Duchess. Knowing the emperor rarely grants audiences, Ophelia suggests that Callian ask him about it himself. He realizes she's trying to provoke him, which just pisses him off even more. To really get under the prince's skin, she claims the emperor told her to drop by more often, so they'll be seeing each other a lot from now on. Callian demands to know what kind of stunt she pulled this time and if she used dark magic. But Ophelia just laughs and replies she would use it on the prince if she could. Callian tells her to get lost because Flur's about to arrive. She just laughs and asks what they're supposed to do now, since the lady's already here. As the prince turns around, Ophelia grabs his arm and tells the countess she's delighted to see her. Watching this scene unfold, Flur freezes in her tracks. Callian pulls away and rushes to explain to Fleur that there's been a misunderstanding. Fleur, totally convinced the Duchess set this whole thing up, believes him. She bows and greets Ophelia. The girl thinks with bitter resentment that the Duchess is underestimating her. The heroine tells Fleur she just stopped by for a quick chat with His Highness. Then, out of nowhere, she asks the girl if she's been feeling all right. After all, the last time they met was at the Grand Duke's place, and Ophelia wants to know if Fleur slept soundly after making her look like such a terrible person in front of everyone. The girl thanks the Duchess for her concern about her sleep, which was actually very peaceful. Ophelia responds by telling her to watch her back from now on, promising to make things so uncomfortable for Fleur she won't know what hit her. Callian turns to the heroine, but she announces that it's time for her to leave. As she walks past him, Ophelia adds that, just like she said, she's innocent. Fleur and Callian watch the heroine go. But when she turns to the prince, she can tell by his face that he's got doubts about her. Waiting for his wife in the carriage, Sylvester can't shake the Emperor's words, that he could have paired Callian with Ophelia. The Duke originally planned to use her, but now he doesn't get why he's so against divorcing her. The heroine hops into the carriage in a fantastic mood. Giving his wife a hard look, he asks if meeting the prince messed with her head. Ophelia replies that her mood improved because she managed to put the Countess in her place. Sylvester watches the girl for a while, his face serious. But her quirkiness gets to him again, and the Duke cracks a smile. Noticing this, Ophelia tells Sylvester again that he lost because he smiled. Not just anyone can figure out what the Duke's thinking. But Ophelia, she reads him like an open book. Getting close, Sylvester strokes her face, telling her his wife really is beautiful. She doesn't get why he's saying these dumb things, but she doesn't want to set him off, so she doesn't ask. The girl just agrees that, yeah, she's kinda cute. Running his hand over her face again, Sylvester promises to get her anything she wants. Ophelia thinks her husband's acting especially weird today, but she tries to brush it off. The morning sun peeks through her eyelashes and wakes her up. Opening her eyes, she's surprised to see it's not her bedroom ceiling and tries to figure out where she is. Then, Ophelia hears Sylvester's voice next to her, telling her she's in his room. He says the girl fell asleep on the way and he had to carry her, so he's hoping she'll understand. Ophelia still doesn't get why she's here, and the Duke calmly explains that he combined their bedrooms. Sylvester reminds her that he promised to fulfill his wife's wishes. Ophelia freaks out, not understanding where he got the idea that she wanted this. She values her personal space, thinks this is way too much, and demands he put everything back the way it was. After waiting for her to calm down a little, Sylvester calmly replies that he'll give her a ton of cash. Ophelia's previous freak-out vanishes instantly, and she asks if he moved all her stuff. It finally hits the heroine that they're now sleeping together. The Duke replies that's right since they're husband and wife. He reaches out and traces his finger across her lips. Ophelia's saying she'd rather just leave it at that. Sylvester laughs, telling his wife to chill. He's just messing with her, he doesn't have any other plans. He says now that Ophelia's gotten close to the Crown Prince, she needs to get closer to her husband too, give Callian something to sweat about. The heroine can't believe he's redecorating the rooms just for that. If he's offering her money, he's definitely got other angles he's working. She wants to know if that's really all there is to it, and demands he tell her if Sylvester's up to something. But the Duke refuses to talk if Ophelia isn't going to forgive him for what he says. Then he laughs, confirming it's a joke and this is all really just about the Crown Prince. Sylvester moves closer to the heroine, adding that to pull it off, they need to act like a real couple. He touches a lock of her hair to his lips, and she realizes she's in deep trouble. The next morning, our girl wakes up and Sylvester's already split to take care of business. A wave of dread hits her when she realizes she's actually bummed she didn't see him before he left. She's hoping Sylvester isn't turning into that guy, you know, the special one. Ophelia doesn't want to get tangled up in anything messy, so she's gonna play it cool and keep her feelings from getting out of hand. Jasmine suggests the Duchess take a trip to the Cardell estate. She got invited to a tea party there tonight and thought it'd be awesome if her ladyship came along. But Ophelia's totally not feeling it, especially since she already swiped a painting from the Earl and stole his wife's invite. Jasmine's sure the Countess is pretty gullible, and if the Duchess brings her a little something, she'll forget all about it. She suggests Ophelia give the Cardells that brooch she picked up for her at Madame Yona's boutique. And even though Jasmine would love to keep the brooch, she knows this little bauble could be way more useful. The Countess is obsessed with stuff that only exists in a handful of copies. Jasmine's positive that Lady Cardell will love this gift. For a second, Ophelia thinks she gets how kings feel surrounded by suck-ups. The heroine's also worried she's been so naughty that one brooch might not cut it. Jasmine smiles and tells the Duchess not to sweat it, 'cause she's already taken care of something. Lady Cardell's tea party definitely didn't start how she expected. The Earl announced he was hiring mercs for an expedition, but these roughnecks barged onto the estate without so much as a "how do you do" to the staff. And even though the Countess tried to shoo them away, saying her husband wasn't home yet, they refused to leave. The guys rudely demanded they at least be allowed to admire the pretty ladies, and Cardell was too scared to call the guards. Just when the tension between them is about to explode, the Countess hears a familiar voice at the gate. She looks up and sees Ophelia standing there, totally unfazed by these mercenaries, confidently telling them to shut their traps.